Alrighty. Can I have a motion to bring us out of closed session, please?
Motion to come out of closed session.
Second?
Dave first, and Chris second, and Amanda, will you take us through roll call?
Amanda, yes. Chris,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Deborah,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
and Nancy.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously to come out of closed session.
Okay. So I'm going to call this part of our meeting to order. And it's 6:05. And, I'm sorry. Let's turn my computer right on. Okay. All right, I'm going to ask everyone to rise to the pledge, please. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We have some exciting new hires on our agenda, so we're going to start there before we start with citizen comments. And I think the first is Dr. Cook.
It is, but I can't talk, so Mrs. LaFleur is going to
Okay.
speak for me tonight.
Okay, come on down.
Yes, I'm going to speak for Dr. Cook because she's going to be a little harder to hear.
I hear ya.
So,
Allergies are really bad.
I know. On Dr. Cook's recommendation, I'm pleased to bring forward for hire Mr. Connor Longendike as a special education teacher to begin the 2022-23 school year. Mr. Longendike's work experience began in Williamston as a student teacher at our high school. He has most recently served as a long-term substitute teacher in special education at the middle school classroom from January of 2022 to this present time. In both of these positions, Mr. Longendike did an outstanding job showing his understanding of the unique needs of students with disabilities. He developed positive relationships with students, staff, and families while supporting our special education systems. He has facilitated many special education meetings and displayed his knowledge in writing data-driven and assessment-based IEPs. During these meetings, both myself and the special education director observed his caring, articulate, and well-organized manner. Mr. Longendike earned his Bachelor of Science in Special Education for students with cognitive impairment and English degree from Central Michigan University. Mr. Longendike met with Dr. Spina and Dr. Cook when he became the chosen candidate for our open position he was currently filling. He impressed both of them when he spoke of his growth from being a student in Williamston Community Schools to serving as a special education teacher. With no reservation, Dr. Cook recommends the board approve Mr. Longendike's hire as a special education teacher for Williamston Community Schools. Do you have any questions?
No? Are there any questions? All right. So I think it's important that each candidate gets their time in the spotlight. I'm going to ask, before we hear about the next candidate, I'm going to ask for a motion for Connor
Longendike.
Longendike.
I would like to make a motion that the Williamston Board of Education hire Connor Longendike to be a special education teacher beginning the 2022-23 school year.
Second?
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're going to listen to one more and then we'll do our congratulations. And I believe this is Dr. Phil.
Thank you. Good evening. It is my pleasure to bring Mr. Ryan Spain to the board this evening as a candidate to fill our open full-time science position at the high school. Ryan is a native Californian who has come to Michigan. He went to Michigan State University where he majored in physics and education. He did his student teaching at Mason High School, and he's been teaching at Howell High School for the last 3 years. His references, including his current principal, department chair, and mentor teacher, are phenomenal. You can tell that he's the type of individual they do not want to lose. They talked about moving him forward into teaching more of their advanced classes. They talked about his relationships with students, how he's the type of teacher that students go into his classroom after school's over and just hang out before their afternoon activity might start. They talked about his content knowledge, his collaboration with his peers, how he's the go-to person. If there's an immediate emergency absence within the department, they know they can go to him to make lesson plans, that he just is all around a team player, both when it comes to students and staff. So we're very pleased to have him as a candidate, someone who has experience but is still young and can hopefully bring that energy to the rest of our department. So with that, I bring Mr. Ryan Spain to the board for a vote.
All right. Are there any questions? Can I have a motion, please?
Make a motion that the Williamston Board of Education hire Ryan Spain to be a teacher beginning the 2022-23 school year.
Second.
Second, Dave. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Congratulations. So my daughter is grad school.
It's about 45 minutes, so if I'm a little bit, it's long.
Since there's going to be like a ton of something. I
Thank you.
Congratulations.
It started like all gloomy, but now it's.
And you do not have to stay, it's a long meeting, so please feel free to go if you like. There's no hard feelings if you cut out. Okay, this next part of our meeting is open for citizen comments. You get 3 minutes, and I will give you a 1-minute warning. And this time is for anything that's on the agenda. If you would like to make a citizen comment for something that is not on the agenda, that's at the end of the meeting, so you will still have a chance. So is there anyone that would like to step to the podium for citizen comments? All right.
Hello. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Juliana Lewis. My address is 329 Split Rail Ridge, and I am a junior at Williamson High School. And I'm here tonight to bring forward concerns regarding the requirements for the PE credit for graduation. So, I feel that students involved in marching band as well as other athletics should be able to gain the PE credit through the activities that they are doing. I myself am a part of the marching band as well as participated on the golf team and the soccer team. We practice even more than the average PE class, and frankly, I don't see the value in taking a class where I'm exercising the same amount of effort to gain just a credit. So just for some background information on this, a typical PE class is approximately 45 minutes long, factoring in 15 minutes for just changing into your PE clothes and giving the instructions. So in total, that adds up to 225 minutes or 3.75 hours a week of physical fitness in that structured class period. Now, at the end of the semester, this averages to about 72 hours of physical fitness. Now, comparing that to a marching band, we start our practice at band camp, which itself is a week-long, 12 hours a day rehearsal. Now, obviously, that is not in the structured school time, but during school hours, and we practice about 1 hour a day, as well as 3-hour rehearsals on Monday nights. So this averages out to 8 hours of a total, basically for the whole week. Now, that does not include the 72 hours from band camp, the football games, and marching conventions that we attend throughout the season. Without all of that, you're looking at approximately 96 hours of physical activity built into our schedules. Now, as you can tell, when you weigh 72 to 96, it is much more, even in marching band. So this exceeds the expectations of a typical PE class. And although it's not as long as a typical semester, because we typically end in late November, there's still more hours put in by multiple individuals than in a typical PE class. And I know I speak on behalf of more than just myself when I say this, that many band members share the same view. And, you know, I just encourage you guys to please look at this and take time to review and critique this issue and possibly revise this for the upcoming school year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else?
My name is Norm Jolin Jr. My address is 1385 East Sherwood Road. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a 1990 graduate of Williamston. My father was an educator here for 31 years. I have 2 daughters in the system. I absolutely love Williamston. For the last 14 years, I've been on the Williamson Schools Foundation, serving as chair for the past 5. So I love the community, love what we're doing. I have a couple of questions that I'm hoping to have answered tonight regarding the standards-based grading proposal that is going to be on the agenda. First off, I'm wondering, is there a timeline for when this is going to be implemented? Like, is it starting in 2022, 2023? And once that timeline's established, are the students and parents going to be fully informed in this change in grading philosophy before it's implemented? The second question, and it's a little bit more difficult for me to ask this because in all my time here, I've seen some amazing educators and amazing teachers. We continue to have just people that go above and beyond the call of duty when they're teaching our students. But it should be mentioned. If or when there's a statistically significant number of students that don't achieve this proficiency, one, is there a plan in place? How is the administration informed? How are the teachers going to be held accountable? How will, and who holds them accountable for, failing to help these students achieve these standards? So I will await the, hopefully, answers to my questions later in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Again, there will be another time at the end of the meeting for anybody else that would like to address the board. Moving on, celebrations. Adam.
All right, well, we're heading into the celebratory period of the year, and there'll be the next 2 to 3 weeks are extremely busy, but they should also be a lot of fun. There's a lot of great things to celebrate, and really recognizing in particular our senior class, which will be finishing its educational journey here in our district, and I also have some retirees, and there's just a lot of really cool events almost every day, really, from here on out till probably the end of the first week of June. So just a great time of year. The weather's great outside. It's just a lot of fun. So looking forward to the next month. Kind of getting into some of the more traditional celebrations. One big plus was we were able to get our softball scoreboard installed last Friday afternoon, just a few hours before senior night. That had been a project that really spanned about a year. We ordered it, there were supply chain issues, and it showed up in the winter. We had to sit outside, and we wanted to get it installed this spring, but it wouldn't stop raining. And we tried several times, but we couldn't get the truck out there to work right. And finally, it stopped raining for 2 or 3 consecutive days. We were able to get it installed. So it looked great. I know softball boosters assisted with the lettering that's up at the top of the scoreboard, but if you haven't seen it, it's right outside of the middle school, and it looks fantastic. Sticking with sports, our girls soccer team is now ranked number 2 in Michigan. They're also the 1 seed for the CAAC Gold Cup, which is being hosted here this week, and looking forward to seeing what their postseason holds in store for them. Shifting over to the financial side of the house, as I think everyone's aware, Moody's increased our overall rating a couple weeks ago. This is based on a number of factors, but mostly due to a pattern, a trend of increasing enrollment and more established fiscal stability, which we have achieved over the last number of years. So I'd like to thank Sarah for her work and steadfastness in getting Moody's to take another look at us. We've really been pressuring them every year, and to their credit, they've been open-minded and willing to take a clean look at us. And so, as a result of that, we've moved up four ratings categories in the last 4 years, which is significant. Over the weekend, though not directly connected to the district itself, we had the Williamson Schools Foundation golf outing, and we had numerous high school students involved in that, including a golf outing poster competition winner. We had members of the high school golf team out at different holes participating with the amateur golfers, I guess you could call them. And the high school golfers are pretty good, I gotta say. They're really good. And that said, as you know, last spring, our golf team was the best in the state, and this year they are amongst the best as well. But getting to go out and actually watch them play, they're quite talented. As our marketing and communication committee knows, over the last couple of years, we've had this kind of ongoing goal of trying to get road signs put up around the entrances to town. We ran into a lot of bureaucracy. It was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. However, over the weekend, we were able to get our first sign put up. It's a little dated. It's from about 2 years ago, 2 years and change. It's our Education Excellence Award, and that was put up. It's just past Old Nation. If you're heading into town, heading east, and so that's up on M43, and we're in the works to get other signs made and installed too. So hopefully over the summer we'll be able to continue the momentum with that. But the sign looks great. It's a nice way to see the district as you're heading in from that direction. And like I said, the goal is to get additional signs put up heading in from the other areas. The basketball team, the boys basketball team, is continuing its victory tour, I guess you could call it. They were at Love Nuts on Friday evening and were recognized there and got to throw the first pitch out. And then tomorrow they will be at the Capitol to be recognized by the state government for their accomplishment. So should be a pretty cool representation of our district. And prom was this past Saturday evening, and as always, that's a tremendous undertaking. So our high school administration and faculty advisors, a lot of high school staff that participated in making that event a success. And so thank you to all of them, and best of all, I didn't get any phone calls Saturday night, so that meant everybody was safe and had a good time and got home from that event okay. And then shifting to the website, a couple items that I'll touch on. First, let's see, I guess I'll start from the top and work our way down. So first, a couple weekends ago, the Williamston Invitational was renamed after Mitch Slutsky, who, as you know, is a Hall of Fame track coach and retiring educator, 31 years in our district. Best part was it was a surprise event that alumni and some of the assistant coaches and others had set up for him, so we had no idea what was going to happen. And then they got him in the middle of the meet during the break, and it was very well done. He received a number of different recognitions, including a legislative recognition by some of our elected officials, and probably the coolest part were all the alumni that came in from around the country to participate in that. And I think that fact says everything that needs to be said. But anyway, the Invitational has been named after Mitch, and so his legacy as our coach, a longtime coach of our track program, will carry on even after his retirement. This past weekend, the Williamston, or I guess it was 2 weekends ago now, the Williamston Middle School Quiz Bowl team traveled to Chicago and was able to finally participate in an in-person national tournament, even though they qualified it for it now 3 years in a row. And from everything I've heard from Coach Johnny Ellis, he had a great time, some really good photos, and kids had a blast out in Chicago and did very well. I mean, if you're competing at the national level, right, you're going to have some serious competition, but kids did a great job with that. We had 10 students named as CAAC Scholar Athletes, and we're able to go to that reception, which was hosted by Tim Stout and the athletic director at Michigan State University. We probably could have had a lot more than 10 Scholar Athletes, but that's the cap on number of students that a district can name. So we used all 10 of our spots and had 10 excellent students at that event representing our district. And then finally, here at the middle school students had the opportunity to participate in a pilot program looking at how to remove food scraps from landfills. And so there was an outside organization that came in here and interacted with the students. It's kind of a test run to see how that might look in a middle school setting. So unique opportunity for kids here in this building to participate in that. So quite a few events, but I think that trend will continue as we go through the next few weeks of celebrating our students, our staff, and our district. And then celebrations for this evening, pending your questions.
Any questions for Adam?
No?
There's a lot of exciting stuff. Okay, moving right along, I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed middle school principal.
Good evening. So tonight I'm going to focus on three areas of our school improvement progress, and that includes our reading strategies. So we focused in the fall on our reading strategies and improving reading strategies across our building, as well as in the spring we focused primarily on CHAMPS, which is a positive behavior system that we're using across grade levels and also in all of our content areas to really promote the positive behavior and have consistency across our building. And then our ongoing work has been focused on our social emotional health for our students and our staff, and that's been throughout the year. Specifically around the literacy initiatives, so we were looking at our NWEA reading data as well as our classroom data, and we noticed that with the pandemic over the last year or so, that we were really noticing that we needed to focus in on creating some strategies and really helping students improve their reading skills. We know that we had that gap in their instructional time last year, and we really wanted to make that a priority this fall. So we focused on the before, during, and after reading strategies, and it was across our building, across all content areas. We expanded that into learning walks, so teachers were partnered up. They partnered themselves up with another colleague where they were able to go in and observe the reading strategies being used, and then we brought that back to our whole staff, where we did a share out as far as what we were noticing in the classrooms and some positive work that we were seeing in the classroom. We had some testimonials from some of our teachers. A music teacher reported that using these strategies in the classroom allowed that before reading where they were focusing on vocabulary, and then they could really start to apply those reading strategies to the learning that was taking place in the music classroom. And then also we had teachers that also mentioned that it promoted active engagement. So when students were asked questions before they were reading, it promoted that active engagement where they were thinking about the reading, thinking about how they connected to the reading, and then they were able to apply that to the learning that was taking place. And then also, some of the teachers reported that annotated notes was another area where they were using the annotations to apply that before reading skill, and then to annotate their thinking along the way when they were reading, and then they could apply that to those summative assessments later on with their reading. So it was really a great push out for the fall. We continue to implement those strategies, and that'll be some ongoing work that we do over the course of our school improvement for the following year too. Another focus area was CHAMPS, and CHAMPS is an acronym that really is focused on that active engagement and positive behavior in the classroom. So it's focusing on conversation that's taking place in the classroom, how students are going to seek help, what they'll do as far as the expected behaviors during an activity in the classroom, when they're getting materials in the classroom, what does that look like when they go to get those materials? How are they participating in the classroom? And then how are they also working on the supplies that are needed? So CHAMPS was something that our leadership team, with the input from our teachers, we noticed that, again, with that gap in that instructional time in person last year, that this was something we needed to be really intentional with rolling out. We decided that a reboot and a review in the spring would help our students kind of finish strong in our second semester. And so we really did focus on reviewing those skills. So you'll see here that these are teachers who are reviewing the concepts of CHAMPS and then also working with their grade level teams and their department teams to really focus on that consistency and those strategies that they would use across the classrooms. We also implemented CHAMPS review as it related to hallway behaviors, cafeteria behaviors, playground behaviors, and that'll again be some ongoing work that we have this upcoming fall. And then our social emotional health has been a top priority for us. That's something that started in the fall and is continuing through the remaining of the school year, where we're really focusing on ways to promote social emotional health for our students. So that's taking place in our Be Nice program. Be Nice is something that involves student input, so students and staff are working together to design lessons that are then pushed out in our AOT sessions once a month. Also some intentional planning around lunch activities that are taking place twice a month. And then also providing resources for families. So the resources are found in our weekly Hive Jive as well as the classroom, Google Classroom, so students can access those resources as needed. We increased our training for staff on restorative justice practices, and with that increase of training for staff, we're able to provide those sessions in a variety of settings. So I might be facilitating a restorative justice session. We may have Erica Williams, our positive behavior coach, and also our RTC coordinator. We're all trained to participate in those sessions, and we've really found that we've been utilizing those quite frequently this year with some positive results. And then also providing those ongoing check-ins. So social worker, counselor, and our RTC coordinator are providing check-ins for students for supports and also providing those mental health supports. So that's our focus on students, but we didn't want to forget about the need for our staff. So as we were looking at social emotional health for our staff, when we met with the staff in the fall, they really did say that they were hungry for those interactions with each other. We didn't have that as much last year. We were a little more isolated. And so our team was saying, we really want to reestablish those relationships and have opportunities to get together. So we were really intentional about building in time during our staff meetings. So really prioritizing that time for our staff, as well as doing some intentional appreciation. So the appreciation included things like just quick little Post-it notes that were, posted on their doors or in their classrooms, just to motivate and also create that positive environment. We also engaged in mindfulness PD, so we had staff members in our district and in our building that provided mindfulness strategies that not only the teachers and staff could use, but also they could push it out into the classrooms. So when I'm in classrooms, I'm noticing teachers are intentionally building in time for mindfulness activities for that wellness and social emotional health. And then also providing those check-ins for staff, because we know we focus a lot on students, but we also have our social emotional well-being for our staff. And so check-ins for our staff and also providing those mental health supports for our staff throughout the year. So as we look at next year, it will not come as a surprise that we're working on next year already. And so the leadership team has met. We have a plan in place where we're really going to review and push out the CHAMPS review at the beginning of the school year off to a strong positive start for our students. We have a plan for learning walks in the fall so that we can get into each other's classrooms and learn about those strategies that are being used, and also evaluating how consistent are we using them. Do we have predictability for our students, because we know that that's important. And then around the CHAMPS, the A stands for activity, so really being intentional about building in those active engagement activities with those positive behaviors. So that's a focus for the fall. And then also we know that social emotional learning will still be a priority for us throughout the year. And so we have those intentional curriculum pieces that we're building in and making sure that we carve out times during the school year so that we can support students and staff along the way. Do you have any questions for me?
I have one. What is monthly frozen AOT lessons?
So AOT is our academic overtime, and so once a month we have scheduled times where we meet, and we call it the frozen. So that means students go to a designated AOT teacher, and that's where we push out those social emotional learning pieces in our Be Nice program. So when we're not doing the frozen AOT, we are then going to an open sign-up format. So students are signing up to meet with an individual teacher. So it may be they need some reteaching, or they're going in to retake a test, and it's an academic support. But the frozen AOT is where we're intentionally pushing in those Be Nice lessons. Any other questions?
So, CHAMPS, that's conversation, how, activities, materials, participation, and supplies?
Conversation, help, activity, materials, participation, and supplies.
Okay.
It can also mean support. It depends on kind of the structure of the classroom.
Okay.
Any other questions? Right?
Okay.
Thank you. Move on.
Handbook?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please.
All right. So on page 6, I made an adjustment to the handbook, and that was an update for our school board member, Deborah Wolf. And then on page 7, I included contact information for Director of Finance and Supervisor of Technology. And then on page 14, I made some adjustments to the tardy description and the importance of students arriving to class on time. And then I also included the amount of time that we have for passing time, which is 4 minutes between classes. And then in the consequences section on page 15 for tardy consequences, I included parent contact from the RTC coordinator because that's happening and it wasn't reflected in our handbook. So I wanted to be sure that families understood that when a tardy occurs, the third tardy through the fifth tardy, that there is parent communication that's happening. And then on page 18 is a revision to reflect our new dress code policy.
Just to add, that's the same policy before already passed earlier.
Yeah, yeah. And then on page 21, in the abusive offensive language level 2 and 3, I was noticing that there was a range in that violation as far as the behavior that was being demonstrated. And some of the violations were a little more significant than others, specifically around racial and ethnic slurs, abusive offensive comments. And so I increased the range to reflect those behaviors that we've been seeing in school. And then also on page 21, the violation of academic integrity policy, the consequences or the way that it was being addressed wasn't really in alignment with our grading practice. For example, the students were given a 0 for assignment. We do not give zeros in our grading practice. And so B and C was reflecting really the practice that we're utilizing at the middle school, which is a student may get an incomplete for an assignment until they do complete it at a later date. And so C really reflects that conversation between a student and a teacher where a new assignment or an adjustment to that assessment is being made. On page 23, disrespect, changing that to a range between a level 1 and 2, and that was really in response to the range of behavior that we were seeing at the middle school. And then on page 25, adding in the category of safety, level 1 through 2. We were noticing that there were some behaviors in the school that really fell in that category of safety, but safety wasn't in the code of conduct, so we added that in. And the last is the technology misuse. So technology misuse, we changed that from a level 1 through 3. An example of a level 1 would be if a student is asked to keep their cell phone, for example, in their locker, or to stow their cell phone away because it's not being used for academic purposes, as there is a violation. That would be an example of a level 1. So those are all the changes in the handbook. Do you have any questions or feedback?
I just have a question regarding the levels. I see some of, they tell you what a level 1 is, what a level 2, what a level 3. Some of the new ones haven't give example of that.
Oh, so some of the category?
Yeah, like, just so that it's, the safety level 1 and 2. Should we itemize out the 1 and 2 to kind of give examples of what is considered a 2 versus a 1?
Well, the levels are identified as far as the infractions. The levels are identified on page 27.
Okay.
Any other questions or feedback?
Well, like a level 2, so like level 2 would be considered serious or illegal. So we would, I guess it's fine.
Julie, did you get your question answered?
I did. I was just, some of these seem to be more where they just fall in, where it could be, I thought a little bit itemized without it. I mean, obviously you're going from speech is not illegal at any point, but it does have serious in there, so it's just.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again,
Thank you.
I keep stating, this is very, very helpful going through and being able to see where we need to look, where the.
It is,
So,
it is really
and
nice.
it's very much appreciated. And now we have, do you have any questions, Adam?
I'm good.
Okay, we're gonna move on to Dr. Dull and his high school group. Sorry, I'm trying to.
So we are moving into the high school education update, and actually for our first presentation, I have 2 staff members here. Ms. Mary Beth Konetsky and Ms. Caitlin Wilcox, one of our special education teachers and one of our social workers, and they're going to be the 2 advisors overseeing our new Connect program that we are implementing next year. This is something that actually has been in development for about 3 years and came to a screeching halt with COVID. So we are ready to implement this. Actually, it's already half implemented as far as mentors go, and then bringing the upcoming freshmen on board in August. So they are going to present this part of the presentation.
All right.
All right, so I am Kate Wilcox. I am the school social worker at the high school.
And I'm Mary Beth Konetsky, the special education teacher at the high school.
Okay. So just kind of going over the purpose and overview of this program. So Connect is a mentor program that will pair up 11th and 12th grade mentors with all incoming 9th graders. So every 9th grader that steps foot in the building next year as a high schooler will have a mentor assigned to them. And really, our goal with this program is to make that transition really successful and really help them navigate that new world of high school, right? And one thing that we're also excited to embed in this program is that Be Nice philosophy. So all 9th graders through this program will also be fully trained in learning the Be Nice action plan and have that mental health awareness and suicide prevention training kind of built right in there. So kind of the bulk and what this program will actually look like. The mentors, 11th and 12th grade mentors, will have about 5 or 6 mentees, so 5 or 6 freshman students that they will be paired with for the course of the school year. They will meet them at Freshman Orientation Day, and on that day they'll get to do some team building, some relationship building, share out contact information so they can touch base with each other throughout the school year, and also do a tour of the building that their mentor will guide them on. And again, we'll kind of dive into that Be Nice philosophy, where they'll be able to talk about the resources in the building. All of the freshmen will get to know who they can go to, who their supports are, and make sure they have some solid protective factors in place and other good things to maintain wellness as they kind of make that transition and have that open door to have that conversation with their mentors. After that orientation, there will be monthly check-ins that are initiated by the mentors to see how things are going and touch base with them. We had some mentors who were like, I'm going to bring donuts in the morning once a month and meet with my kiddos as a group. But they're going to initiate that contact, and then also the freshmen will be able to reach out to their mentors anytime needed throughout the school year, so it will be ongoing support.
All right, so how we got our mentors. In January, we started recruitment first with asking gen ed teachers and special education teachers who are some top students that they would recommend that would stand out amongst their peers as a good leader to incoming freshmen. We got a whole slew of names recommended to us, and then we took those students and had a meeting with just the students that were recommended to the program, saying, hey, your teachers identified you as an awesome student. You would be an outstanding role model. We would love for you to be a part of this program, and told them a little more about it. And we also did a school-wide recruitment through daily announcements, through video screencasts and presentations, flyers all over the building to get students interested and involved in the program. We had, I think, about 30 students apply through the program. We've accepted 27 of them after going through their interview process, where we gave them scenario-based questions like, how would you actually handle this situation if it happened on orientation day, or if something came up over the course of the school year while you're mentoring them. Those 27 students that were accepted went through that application process, were approved by the teachers and administration in our building. And we're just really astounded by how many students are actually wanting to be involved in a new program. I'll admit I was a little nervous with trying to launch a new program, like, all right, are we gonna have enough students that are interested in being part of something that hasn't existed in our district before? And I was astounded by how many of them really identified, like, hey, this is something I wish I would have had as a student coming in, especially for our students that started high school when we were still online last year. They recognized, like, this would have been super helpful in that transition from middle school to high school. So it's really exciting to see their engagement and wanting to be here, as well as the teachers that are recognizing this as helpful too for the incoming 9th graders.
So kind of where we're at, as Mary Beth said, we have 27 mentors that we have selected, and all of those students have excellent academic standing, no behavioral issues, highly recommended from our staff. We also selected 5 captains, which are students who kind of stand out even within those mentors to be leaders within our group. What we're currently working on, we're kind of honing in and fine-tuning a training day. So the week before school starts, all mentors will go through a training day with myself and Mary Beth, where they will kind of learn the nitty-gritty of what are the must-dos to be a stellar mentor for your 9th graders, and then also we'll do some dry runs of orientation day so they can get a feel of what that will actually look like. And then 2 days later we'll be kicking off orientation day, and that's when we will have a warm welcome for all the 9th graders. Everyone will get to meet their mentors and do a tour of the building, and again kind of that team building time together. Yes, and from there, Mary Beth and I are going to be checking in with the mentors once a month to see, hey, have you made contact with everybody? How's it going? Are there any sticky situations that you need support with from us? So we'll be helping to guide them along the way as well. So we're very excited about this program. We've put in some hard work already, and we're excited to see it kind of take off. Any questions about Connect?
How many students per mentor, and what's the difference between the role that a captain has versus a crew member?
Yeah, so each mentor will have 5 or 6 freshmen. So a pretty small group, a nice size. And the difference between captains are just doing a little bit of a behind the scenes things with me and Mrs. Konecki. So when we have training day and everyone's a little bit nervous, even those mentors, right? And we ask for people to get up and do team building or to model an activity, our captains are going to be like, yeah, I'm the one, right? So they're going to step into that role and help us behind the scenes a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
You said you're gonna meet with them once a month. Is that all of the mentors at the same time once a month, or are you gonna split it into like 2 groups or 3 groups or 4?
So our meetings with
Yes.
mentors
Yeah.
once a month, it might not even be face-to-face. We haven't decided what that looks like. It might be a Google form to say, this is when I checked in with my 9th grader, this is how it's going, do I have any concerns? If they need to touch base with us in person, we could plan that out as well.
And we have our first whole group meeting before the end of the school year to communicate a little more information, like, hey, this is what you can expect on training day. Here's some more nitty-gritty for what you need to know right now over the summer.
How does that work if there are emergent issues that do come up between mentor and mentee that they identify as concerning?
Yeah, so we will have all of our mentors kind of know that process. So in the kind of have a very thorough description of what training day will be, and make sure mentors know immediately to come to us, or really any adult in the building, just like they would if they had a concern about any other friend or peer that they were in contact with at school. Yes.
I know you said the mentors are top-notch students, but did you get a sense if there's any diversity in their interests? Because, if it was all jocks, that's not going to be so representative.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. No, we were really kind of astounded by the wide variety of students that we have. They're all very high achieving students, but we've got some athletes, we've got some, band kiddos, we've got some kiddos who aren't, heavily involved in too much, but they're just stellar and they want to help out. They're just looking for a way to, be a leader in our building. So we have a really, really nice, well-rounded group.
And are you thinking you might allow the students to switch their mentor? Because I just know what a difference it makes if you see somebody that has similar interests to you.
Sure, yeah, that's not something we'd really talked about or considered. I think if someone was really struggling with their mentor, we would absolutely want to make sure they had a good fit and somebody that they connected with.
Okay. I see that coming up, so thanks for thinking about that.
Yeah. Any other questions?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So is there a plan in case, you have 27 mentors who are in high achieving other activities, it's such a fun day, the first day of school when they're a senior or 11th grader and everything's rosy and everything's wonderful. And then they get into January and it's like, I don't have time for this. This is overwhelming me. I can't really put in the time.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to track that, to watch that, to have a mentor say, listen, I need to step back and give them an opportunity and put someone else in there?
Yeah, I think through our monthly check-ins with them, that would be the time to really, for us to be able to say, how are things going for you, right? So Mary Beth and I are really there to support the mentors through this process. And really, as we've described it to them, because a lot of these students are students who are juggling 5 million things. They're the kiddos that are in 5 extracurriculars and, straight A students and are doing a lot already. Really, the bulk of this is that freshman orientation day where they're leading that, kicking that off, doing that building time together, and from there on out, it's the expectation that you're a go-to check-in person for me to know, for kiddos to know, 9th graders to know. I have somebody who I can send a quick text to if I don't really know what Spirit Day is tomorrow, right? Or just have an upperclassman to be able to touch base with. So not a huge outside time commitment, just a once a month quick check-in.
I kind of understand what you're saying, Amanda. I think we look so much to our top students and they get all the glory, but we've got 500 students probably that are would do just as great a job. So I encourage, not that I'm going to micromanage this, but I encourage you to look outside the box with some of our students that might not like my definition of a high achieving student probably isn't gonna be the same as some of
Right.
yours.
Right.
So we have a lot of fantastic students that I sometimes think we forget or overmiss, so I would just challenge you to look outside the box of who they might be.
Right.
I think sometimes we fall on the same kids over and over again, and we got, 150 in a class, and, 5 of them might be this group, but you got 100 others that are just as stellar. So I would challenge you to look outside the box of those mentors.
Both of you guys were saying that the one concern I did have was the fact of you don't know how much activity they're gonna get from their people that they're mentoring. So it could get very overwhelming, and if they're only meeting once a month or even by Google, that it might be a little bit, so maybe set up maybe some other Google Classroom check-ins or something like that. So, because obviously if they're overwhelmed and you don't know for 24 days later, and all these people, it might be a little bit lengthy time.
Absolutely.
So maybe lower that in, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have a Google Classroom for our mentors, and they're in open communication with us. So we'll make sure on training day to really stress that for them to let us know how they're doing. And just like we would any other student, if someone was struggling going to a friend again and again, we would want them to reach out to the adult support in the building. So we'll make sure our mentors are trained in that.
The same principles they're sharing with the freshmen, we want them to make sure they're applying them to their own lives and that our doors are open to support them.
It's kind of a layer, right? Because now you're mentors to 27 students and they're mentors to 160, so. It's a ladder.
It's just another way that we're trying to develop student voice and student advocacy, and again, at its roots, Be Nice is supposed to be a student-led, student-owned philosophy, right? I mean, there's a bunch of stuff the building already does and the district already does, like top-down. This is really supposed to be grassroots, students starting to take ownership and advocacy, looking out for each other, and so this is a great way to kind of jumpstart that philosophy. And just like any other initiative, right, there'll be things that get changed over time. That's normal, but the key is starting. That's great work.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I just want to publicly recognize Caitlin and Mary Beth before they move on, how much time and energy they have put into developing this program and implementing it and getting it going. This has kind of been a passion project. I feel freshmen, they need that connection when they come to the building, right? They need to have that go-to person that they can ask a question to. If they don't have older siblings, they need to have that one person who's going to have the answers, like what is the Spirit Day theme tomorrow, right? Who's the teacher in charge of this activity? What lunch do I have? So think about starting a new job, right? Just kind of all those logistical questions. Going to high school is scary, and for some of our students, and this took talking to another district that has a program similar to this in place, gathering all of that information, and then looking at it and really developing it for WHS and how can we improve what is in an outside district and incorporate Be Nice into it. The time and effort that they have put into this, which we're hoping has a positive impact on all 150-ish incoming freshmen is just huge. And 4 years from now, all of those kids in the building, right, will have been coached up on Be Nice from day one, and they'll all have that connection, hopefully, coming into the building. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, first up is I'm going to speak on behalf of Michelle Cook, so imagine her voice. This has to do with a modification to our one of our special education math classes that Mr. Johnny Ellis would teach. So I'm going to read Dr. Cook's statement. Tonight I'm recommending to the board to approve a new modified Algebra 1 class at the high school. The reason for the adoption of this new class is to best meet the needs of some of our special education students who their team feels would best be served by utilizing a personal curriculum for their geometry credit and providing that credit through a 2-year modified Algebra 1 class. To provide context, the personal curriculum, PC, is a tool for modifying the Michigan Merit Curriculum, MMC, in order to individualize the rigor and relevance of the state graduation requirements. For students with special needs, students can still graduate under the Michigan Merit Curriculum MMC and get a diploma while not taking all of the required MMC courses. We can modify the classes for students with the personal curriculum, but not the number of credits needed to graduate. For students with IEPs, these modifications or eliminations can be to any MMC required class due to the impact a student's disability has on accessing or demonstrating proficiency and meeting expectations. An important factor for modifying the MMC requirement for a student with a disability, it must align with their IEP, transition plan, and EDP. Specifically, the course would cover the same content as Algebra 1 enrichment, but would do so over 2 years instead of 1. Consequently, students will earn two 2.0 math credits upon successful completion of this 2-year course. Modified Algebra 1 would focus on differentiated learning while meeting the individual needs of students. Students would additionally work on their math-related IEP goals in this class. Prerequisites for a student being placed in this alternative class would be teacher recommendation, an IEP, and a documented/demonstrated math need. And before I answer any questions, I'll just tell you where this comes from. Dr. Cook, Mr. Ellis, the other special education teachers, listening to people at the Department of Ed talking about PC and the graduation math requirements for our students. Right now, they take geometry as a freshman, then Algebra 1, then Algebra 2, and we just kind of crank them through. And what came to light is the Department of Ed, through a personalized curriculum, if students have an IEP, they see it that we need to ensure we're giving students that foundation in algebra. So in order to help them meet their math requirements, currently 4 to graduate, and we already have a 2-year Algebra 2 class, so they take Algebra 2 over 2 years to earn 2 credits. We would basically be doing the same thing with Algebra 1, so they would take Algebra 1 for 2 years to earn 2 credits. That means they would not take geometry, but depending on the student and the individual math needs, we see that we might get farther with students in giving them that foundation in algebra over a 2-year period. This is not necessarily a curriculum revision. Mr. Ellis already teaches this course in 1 year, so it basically would be extending the course to a 2nd year and eliminating geometry. So instead of students getting hit with so many classes every year, it's a different class. Like I said, eliminate geography, extend what is currently being taught into a 2-year program. Are there any questions?
So most of those students then would take it in their freshman and sophomore years then?
Correct, freshman and sophomore. So just like Algebra 2, right now we have extended A, B, C, and D representing the 4 semesters. We would do so here, right? Extended Algebra 1, A, B, C, and D.
Are there any examples where a student would not take it in that sequence but would do like a sophomore, junior year, or would it always be a freshman, sophomore year?
Never say never, right?
Okay.
There could always be an exception depending on the student's individual need.
Okay.
And this is obviously a need we need right now. Looking 4 years from now or 3 years from now, we're constantly looking at this to see what we need to switch up here.
Wait.
Oh, yes.
Let me just ask one question. So if a student is not having geography,
Geometry.
or geometry, sorry, in their junior and senior year, they're still going to need 2 more credits of math. Is there a sequence that they would follow with this that would allow for them to finish off that 2 years?
So the goal coming out of 8th grade, if a student moves into this program, their freshman and sophomore year would take Algebra 1, A, B, C, and D, move into Algebra 2, A, B, C, and D, their junior and senior year.
Okay.
Again, there are, looking at each student individually, we have different options going into the junior year to meet those math credits, but the goal would be with that 2 years of solid foundational Algebra 1 moving into Algebra 2. That's the goal, but again, we look at all students individually based on their disabilities and their IEPs.
Thank you.
And these students all have IEPs.
Correct.
So they're all special.
Correct.
That's a requirement?
That would be for this
For
class,
this.
yes.
Okay.
Any other questions on this? Nice idea. Thanks for switching things up and again thinking outside the box here, Mr. Allen. there anything you'd like to add, Mr. Ellis, about that?
Anything else to add?
Yes. Well, so hello, Johnny Ellis, teacher in high school, and quiz bowl coach. Thanks for mentioning that before. So, and I think that one of the struggles that my fellow special ed teachers, Mary Beth, who you just saw, and then Kristen Goodshow, run into with our students with IEPs, about 80 to 85% of our caseload students. The Wilson Talent Center is a great resource for them, or they're doing the traditional college-bound track. But then there's that small subset of students where it was just very challenging in order to meet all the requirements of the MMC, and then sometimes Wilson Talent Center was perhaps a little too challenging, or a different environment for them to get into. So there's a program at Wilson called the Career Start, which is it can be a 1-year or a 2-year program, which it allows students to explore food service, custodial. They run the store at the Wilson Talent Center. Just this great kind of graduate from high school, get right into the job force, and start working right away. The problem is that program does not cover a number of credits as another program from Wilson Talent Center. All the other programs from Wilson Talent Center do. They help you provide some credits, like they provide a third science credit, a third social studies credit. They provide fine arts credit. I mean, so you can swap a lot of those credits out with the traditional CTE, career technical education at Wilson, but the Career Start does not. And so we've not been able to use that for a lot of our students because it was so difficult to get the 3 years of sciences, 3 years of social studies, 4 years of, and then for many of these students, they also have 1 or 2 hours a day of academic support. And so there's only so many hours in the day. And so when we received this guidance this last fall from the Michigan Department of Ed, that we could look at eliminating more of the more challenging, college prep kind of courses for our students, but they were very clear. Algebra is not to be touched. You must have, all students that want a diploma must have the algebra skills, and so that's what we kind of took that ball and kind of ran with that, and then we talked with Dr. Dalp and Dr. Cook. How are we going to present this algebra class, because currently there is the modified algebra 1 class that we teach for our students, and there's modified geometry and modified algebra 2 that are in the handbook. But those followed what I guess they used to be called the power standards. They didn't address the entire course and curriculum, but this class, this proposed class would address the entire algebra curriculum algebra 1 over 2 years. Very small classes, highly supported, highly individualized, very intense, but it's like Dr. Duff said, it really satisfies that basic algebra requirement for our students, and then gives them some flexibility. Maybe they do Career Start, maybe they enter the workforce and do work-based learning, maybe they can take more of the business type classes, because if we free up some room in their schedules while still providing academic support, that's just another opportunity and avenue for our students to follow. So, was that too much? I feel like that.
No, that's great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Are there any questions for either of them?
No?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I don't know, ask, is this something we have to vote on, or is there just a vote?
Well, all these things will kind of move out of edge update and then action.
All right, I am going to jump back to the second half of the high school education update, but in order to honor the time of some of the teaching staff, we kind of rearranged so that they were able to go first. So Connect was the first half. This is the second half of our WHS educational update. What we are going to do, what I'm going to do for a few minutes, is really talk about one of the PD initiatives that we spend a good chunk of our time looking at this year. This is based on the district improvement goal having to do with standardized grading practices. The goal, all schools will adopt and implement a common evidence-based grading system that includes feedback on non-achievement factors. So that non-achievement factor was where we spent 95% of our time this year trying to develop a non-achievement rubric. So first I'm going to talk about objective 2, strategy 2, which has to do with that non-achievement rubric. So starting in the fall, during the 3 PD days that we had in August, as a staff, we really brainstormed some of those student behaviors and traits that teachers feel are important, right? That there are things aside from academics that you learn in high school. So we brainstormed a list of what all of these possible behaviors and traits could be. Then our grading committee, which is made up of 8 educators along with Mr. Armour and myself, met for several months and tried to take those ideas. We looked at several non-achievement rubrics. We looked at local non-achievement rubric from the middle school. We looked at a non-achievement rubric from Teresa Billy, one of our science teachers, former high schools. We looked at O'Connor's non-achievement rubric that he has in his research. So we used those as a little bit of a base, right? And then we tried to develop a rubric based on the brainstorming our teachers did and see if we could put that all together. Originally, we actually had 4 columns. We took it back to the staff in late fall, early winter. They provided feedback. The whole staff did. We went back to the grading committee. We actually had a subgrading committee comprised of Mary Beth that was here, Teresa Billy and Lisa Dean and myself, to try to take all of these ideas that the entire staff had and the grading committee had and draft a rubric. So throughout that process of whole staff, grading committee, subgrading committee, back to the whole staff, several times we ended up with this draft of what we're calling our current non-achievement rubric. So within this rubric, we look at 3 categories: work habits, participation, and behavior. And those will be graded based on 3 scores, 1 for limited, 2 for developing, 3 for proficient. Took this to the faculty in February during our February PD day, and they approved this rubric that we are planning to pilot this semester, and I will talk about that in just a second. Before I move on, because I'm throwing a lot of kind of jargon out there, I guess, are there questions about the rubric itself before moving on? This is similar to WMS's rubric, but it is not a mirror image. We really tried to develop a rubric based on the examples we looked at that represented us. And again, as a reminder, these topics, these have nothing to do with academic learning. So when I say non-achievement factors, I'm talking about all of those components: accountability, responsibility, participation, timeliness, all of those things that don't have to do with demonstrating academic proficiency.
So under work habits, the second bullet fulfills course requirements.
Yep.
How does that not slot into the academic?
So this was a big topic of conversation. We have so many courses at the high school that we wanted to find a way that encapsulated all of the requirements different courses have. So for example, the requirements in an English class might look very different than the requirements in one of our performing arts classes or one of our visual arts classes. So we didn't want to make statements that were limiting to any content area or only the core classes. So it's general on purpose so that when the individual course teacher is filling out the rubric, that teacher can look at, did this student fulfill the course requirements for this specific class? Because turning things in on time doesn't necessarily apply to choir and band, right? You don't necessarily turn things in on time. You have to demonstrate proficiency when playing a scale or participating at a concert, that sort of thing. So Again, yes, a general statement, but that's the reason it was written that way.
Thank you.
So then, on the same lines as that, are the teachers going to, like at the beginning of the year, let their kids know what fulfills their course responsibilities?
Yep, can I come back to that?
Yep.
Okay. I have a timeline on the next slide.
Okay.
I just want to point out that as a bit of an observer of the process that was used, Chris and Steve did an excellent job in taking on a topic that educators have strong opinions on, and really went through a very well thought out, yet deliberate process to guide the staff in this direction. So there's a lot more that took place than what you're seeing. It's like the final product, but there was a lot of hard work that went into getting the school to this point.
Any other questions about the rubric itself? Okay, so our timeline is to ideally get this on the report card for this semester in a non-accountability way as a pilot. You wouldn't think it, but getting a report card modified to include a non-achievement rubric and the 3 categories of participation, work habits, and behavior is way more challenging than it sounds. So as soon as this rubric was approved by the staff in February, we thought, we're ready to go. I shared my draft of my letter with Adam in February that I was going to send home to parents saying, hey, we're going to pilot it. And then I called James, who walked out, and we actually have to contract through an outside tech company to build something that we attach to Power School that modifies our report card for us. Again, way more complicated than it sounds or it should be. So James and I have met with this company multiple times. We finally have the report card that you're seeing here. This is the one that I printed out and took a picture of, mostly to where it needs to be. There were still some bugs as of last week. James had another meeting on Friday after school, and there is another meeting later this week on the calendar where I'm hoping that this report card is totally flushed out and ready to go. Like I said, I have my letter letting students and families know about this ready, but I didn't want to send it out until we know we can do it, right? Because you never know what's going to happen, especially when contracting with outside companies. So the goal is to pilot this on this semester's report card, but there will be no formal accountability. It is just to be informative for parents and for us as a high school to see if this works, right? And a lot of our families have been through this at the middle school level already. Again, although it's not the same identical rubric, the same idea. After we send our report cards home mid-June, we'll send a Google form home just to collect feedback, right? Was this informative? Was the rubric easy to read? Do you have any comments, thoughts, suggestions? If there are major changes that need to happen, we will go back and do those in the fall. The goal would be to officially implement this with the start of the 2022-23 school year. We would not formally implement it before notifying families and students at the very first day of the semester that this is going to be officially implemented. So it would go home in all of my back-to-school communication in August. If the timeline stands and it does become official in the fall, it will go on the transcript starting with the first semester. So that's the second piece that we are then going to work with this tech company. After the report card is done, they're going to modify our transcript so that the 3 categories, the non-achievement categories, are on the transcript. So students will then receive an academic letter grade as well as the non-achievement score next to each class. This is to provide parents with more information about how their student is doing in class. Because when I get my student's report card, and I have twins at the middle school right now, if they get a good grade, if they get a bad grade, I don't know what that grade is comprised of, right? If they have a teacher who takes 10% off because something's late, how do I know that's the reason they got the A-? I can see their scores in Power School, but I don't know if it's based on participation, work habits, behaviors. You know, there's nothing in Power School that tells me if they're squirrely or not in class, if they're a distraction. So the goal of this is to provide parents with more information about how their individual student is doing in class. Yes, here's their academic letter grade, but this is also what's going on with them with these non-achievement factors. Once it's on the transcript, there are some colleges and universities that want that information. Michelle Greenleaf, one of our counselors, has heard that there are some smaller liberal arts schools in the state that love that information because they want the whole child picture, right? They want to know who they're admitting, not just the academic grade, but what does this person look like? If you get straight A's, but you get solid 1s when it comes to behavior or participation, that might paint a fuller picture of who that whole child is. You have some schools, like U of M we've heard, does not care about the non-achievement factors on the transcript. But they will be there, so if the school wants them, they're available. You know, and the goal would be that all of our students, just like the goal is to have all of them perform well academically, would perform well with the non-achievement factors, something else to be proud of and put that feather in their cap on their transcript. So again, the goal of all of this is just to provide more information rather than just a grade, and we don't know what the grade is totally comprised of.
Okay, so that leads me into a couple different, like, double jeopardy kind of things,
Sure.
right? So
Yep.
you have the student that gets straight A's. Now, you made the example of a teacher may mark off 10% because they handed it in late.
Yeah.
Is the teacher allowed to mark that off now? Because now that's a work habit and not a school, so they should still get the A, because if you dock them on the grade and then dock them in the rubrics,
That's a great question.
so they really, you know,
That's not what I'm looking for. I'm actually going to jump to the last slide to answer that question. So at our last staff meeting that we had this month in May, the first week, I told the staff to start trying to separate out non-achievement factors from their academic grades where possible, right? But there are so many topics when we get to looking at our academic grading practices that are already ingrained in teacher grading policies and practices. It's not always possible. So for example, the zeros, for example, the late work. Everything isn't going to be able to be pulled out immediately from a teacher's academic grade. So teachers, as of going into next year, let's make the assumption that the non-achievement rubric is approved and is formally implemented. They do not necessarily have to change their individual academic grading policies going into next year. So next year, approved by the grading committee, for example, we're going to start looking at extra credit and zeros. So the grading committee, the teachers, selected those two topics that they want to look at first when it starts to come to components of the academic grades. So as we start to tick off these individual items, like extra credit, right now, going into next fall, you can have whatever you want in your syllabus because we don't have a building-wide grading policy on extra credit. Whenever we develop that and agree on that as a staff, we will implement it at the next semester so that every teacher has an opportunity to modify their grading practices in their syllabus. So all changes would be implemented at the semester. So as of right now, nothing changes academically. Teachers, if they can, if they're able to pull out the work habits, but again, it's going to be very challenging. I told them it's going to almost be individually. Can they pull this out or that out? And I said, please come talk to me or Mr. Armour if you have questions, and we can help guide you. But it is going to be a messy process just because pulling those academic, what's currently non-achievement but in the academic grade, some of that work isn't going to be able to be done until we figure out what we're doing with those individual academic components. And I know that's very wordy. Same thing with zeros. Right now, the zero practices in the building are all over the place. So our goal is to develop a common building-wide practice for zeros. Are we going to have zeros? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, when do we put the zeros in the book? Because right now, some teachers put them in on day one, thinking if kids know that they have a 0, that will be motivation to get the assignment in. We have other teachers who don't put the 0 in until the last week of the semester because they don't want students to be demoralized by a poor grade, which research tells us can happen, right? So there are a lot of questions to zeros. Are we even going to have zeros? And if so, when do they go in and how? So you can't pull zeros out of the academic grade when looking at the non-achievement rubric until we, in zeros, can be tied to late work, right?
Well, being all that said, should we, I mean, my own thing is, I feel like the student shouldn't be put at penalty because we're going through this very boggy situation over the next year.
So I guess I
Because
don't
it's very
understand how it
difficult.
would penalize the student.
Well, because if somebody turns in their homework late, but it's an A, you're giving them a worse grade on their work habit and a worse grade, and they're getting doubly hit. So it's not like a school is saying, listen, they're a genius, they're doing their work 100% of the time, but they turn it in late 2 weeks every single time. So now they're not getting an A, they're getting a C, and they're getting a 2, a 1 that they're not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really accurately displaying, which is what Dave kind of got into, which is how do you do this without doing grades? It falls into, fulfilling the classwork.
Mm-hmm.
I
So
just
if the
don't
board
think that's
doesn't-
fair.
if
I
the-
think it would be something where we should pilot it internally, and then once we get it right, then we go out, because I don't want a student.
Pilot the
not-
non-achievement factor or the whole grading policy?
Well, we have, you said it's hard we can't change the behavior, so we're gonna change it over a year. Maybe every semester something is changing, because you said a teacher may do a 0 at the beginning, 0 at the end. You're telling teachers maybe don't do the 10% if it's late, try to work it into the work habit. So that's something where the teachers are just getting used to having this as a matrix. But I mean, things are changing, as far as a lot of students, I think, and a lot of, Elon Musk just said, if you're not at this meeting, contributing to this meeting, then leave the meeting. Just do your work and leave it. So, I mean, there's a lot of out there like, I'm doing my work. Why do I just think that the grade should be totally separate from the work habit. And I think from an example, it was hard to do
So I
that.
guess that would be the board's decision if they don't want this formally implemented on the transcript until the academic grading policy is fully developed. I would take my lead from the board on that decision. So we can still include it on the report card, right?
Just not on the official college transcript.
If you don't want it on the transcript, but I do have to say that the academic grading components are going to take us some time, right? It took us almost a full year to do the non-achievement factor. Right now, we're looking at extra credit in zeros. I mean, we also have late work, we have retakes, we have homework. Do we have homework? If so, what's the weight, right? What is our final exam weight? There are so many different components to the academic grade that it could take us a couple years to get through the entire thing.
I'd like to make a comment. I applaud you from an administrative point of view, trying to get all the teachers on the same page with how they approach student behavior in terms of their classwork, because I can see where, from a parent point of view too, the parents get upset because this teacher says, no, I'm taking off 10%, and the other teacher gives them all the leeway to get it finished and get a better grade. And that drives parents crazy. And so from an administrative point of view, it must drive you crazy, because you see some teachers, I'm not going to change, I've done it this way for 30 years, that's how it stands. But really, you need consistency there. So when you finally arrive at that point, I think it's going to be a very strong tool to use.
And that's the goal, right? So when we have 6 students, just like Google Classroom, and the pandemic really helped with this, but where we had teachers, 6 different teachers could have 6 different virtual platforms, and freshmen that we already talked about could walk into 6 different classes, and they have to know 6 different websites and 6 different passwords and 6 different logins and how to navigate 6 different sites, right? Google Classroom is the standard. The goal here, we've already aligned our curriculum. We've already aligned our assessments for the most part. So right now, we have the situation, potentially, right? Where we could have two teachers teaching the same course, teaching the same content, but based on their grading practices, I could be the student, copy me, I do one thing in teacher A's class and I come out with an A minus, and I do the exact same thing in teacher B's class and I come out with a C plus, right? So that's a concern. So as you can imagine, it is messy, passionate work. There are going to be topics that some staff members couldn't care less about. Extra credit doesn't impact me. I don't give extra credit, so I don't care. There are going to be some teachers who feel very passionate about that. And as we work through the different components, there are going to be some that an individual doesn't care about, and there are going to be some that the individual feels passionate about. And it's going to be dependent on the person. And it's going to happen every single topic that we go through. And as we implement these topic by topic, in order to avoid, such a cold dose of water being thrown on you and implementing the whole thing at one time, let's say in a couple years, right? We build the whole thing. It's going to be a lot for the teachers. It's going to be a lot for the students. So that's why the goal is to implement one step at a time. So there is this slower phase in, and after we have hit all of these topics, a few years from now, we have our standardized grading policy across the building that all staff are implementing in their classrooms. Students walk in and they know exactly what to expect. It's just going to take some time. So absolutely, the transition from the non-achievement, this is something we've talked about, from the non-achievement rubric implementation, while the academic piece hasn't been touched because they do double dip, there is no doubt that there could be some double jeopardy there, right?
But isn't that the idea? I mean, I guess I understand your point of what you're saying. If you turn something in late, do you get marked down, or do you get it marked down on your non-achievement? Well, I mean, if I decide not to go to work for the next week and don't tell anybody, that I'm going to get some consequence to that. And so it's like, I feel like if a kid's turning work in late, for whatever that reason is, the teacher is accepting it, they're just going to get marked down. And then I feel like it is okay to tell parents they got an A minus because they turned everything in late. And
But it kind of goes with that thing that we were, like, the rubrics was not supposed to deal with grades. It was supposed to be a behavior.
Supposed to inform the grade and give the parent greater context.
Yeah, so
Correct, for exact why the academic grade is being earned, along with academic performance, right? So it's explaining what the behaviors are and traits are that over the course of 18 weeks.
So I have several questions, sorry.
Nope, go right ahead, Mama.
So I have several questions and possibly follow-up questions to those questions. So when you're talking about a pilot program, how many teachers were involved in this pilot program? You said at the beginning all teachers were informed that this was happening. How did it get whittled down to where there were only a select teachers that were piloting this program?
So as an entire staff, we brainstormed what these non-achievement factors are that are important, right? So each teacher kind of had their couple of traits. And then we have a grading committee that's completely voluntary. It was opened up to anyone on staff that wants to serve on it. We had 8 teachers. There's a counselor, but 8 professional staff on the committee, along with Mr. Armour and myself. So that was completely voluntary. As far as then the subcommittee that really took all of those comments and developed the rubric, that was voluntary. So the whole staff got to give us the traits. I still have the big Post-it note in the office that we worked off of. The grading committee really started to brainstorm, like, well, how do we flesh this out? What does it look like? And then that subgrading committee's task was to actually create it. Went back to the grading committee, the 10, for feedback, went back to the subgrading committee. Once the grading committee of 10 felt it was to a place that they wanted to present it to the entire staff, we went back to the entire staff. I still have if anybody wants to see them, I have every single staff member's hard copy of the first draft in my office with notes that they all wrote on individually. Then I had them go to tables in the same PD session, and there's a table right all over the rubric. I have all of those. I have all of that whole staff data. Then we went back to the grading committee that looked at what the whole staff suggestions were. Then we went back to the subgrading committee who tried to take all of that and really ended up with that, right? Then we went back to the grading committee who decided, yep, this is what we want to take back to the whole staff. So in February, during our PD day, the whole staff saw this. Again, we had opportunities for comments, opportunities for feedback, and I called for a whole staff vote, majority rules. There were a couple people who didn't vote for it, but by far away, 90-95% of the staff supported it.
So you're saying that the whole staff in the high school piloted this second semester?
They haven't
We
piloted.
haven't piloted
They
yet.
haven't piloted.
You said at the beginning that there's no formal anything. It's
It,
not
it's gonna, it
official,
would be
but
piloted on the report card.
Yeah.
So I guess it's-
If we can get the,
So it's not being implemented as far as,
not officially implemented at all, no. So if teachers are able to, if we can get the report card done on our end, working with James and this outside company, I would send a letter home notifying parents and students, right, that we have this rubric developed, that the staff is going to pilot assigning these scores, right, numbers, on the report card, not going on transcripts, don't mean anything official. So it would be the staff really working through it to see how it goes. And like I said, we're going to send a Google form out after that to the parents and the students, probably talk to the staff as well to see what the feedback is. Do we need to revise anything? Is this something not work? Does something not make sense before we officially implement it? So it hasn't been implemented at all. And I call this a pilot draft because, again, it's what we are going to pilot ideally and then gather feedback and either modify or formally implement.
So I guess I want to follow up to that question, because I took your question differently than how you answered.
Okay.
So when I think of a pilot, and I understand this will be done, like June 11th, whatever day, the last day of school is, high school teachers are going to sit down and do their report cards. When I think of a pilot, I think of, if we have 20 teachers at the high school, 5 teachers are going to do this. And they're going to pick 5 kids that they talk to ahead of time saying, these are things I'm going to grade you on, and we didn't talk about it, so you didn't really know I was grading you on it, but that's how that's going to go. So that's what I think of as a pilot. What you're saying is every teacher.
It's a
in the
building-wide
high school,
pilot.
Building-wide will do this and will mark their students down.
Because I don't want any staff member to have to go into, let's say we formally implement it in August, that hasn't had a dry run-through where there wasn't formal accountability going on a student's transcript, right? I don't want to put a staff member in that place where now you have to do this without trying it all or be giving an opportunity, but it is going on a permanent transcript.
So is there and I understand your timeline that you said, if the report card gets done, then you're going to inform parents and students.
Yep.
So is there any thought that you might have some upset parents or students because they're going to be assessed or graded on things that they didn't know they were going to be assessed or graded on?
It's not a grade, right?
Well,
It's a
no.
non-achievement
I mean,
score.
remember,
It's a non-achievement score.
Right,
It
but-
won't impact their academic grade whatsoever. So if this is on the second semester report card, it's not going to change their academic grade
Won't change their
1%.
grade, but if you were a parent and if you were a student and kind of was like, I didn't know I was going to be graded on participation, so I never said a word in this whole class, so I'm going to get a 1. If that came home on a report card,
But that's where I'm hoping that my letter helps balance that out, right?
It's not about, you're not trying to earn a 4-point on the non-achievement rubric, right? It's supposed to be communicating information to the parent about why their child did or didn't earn a 4 point, right? So what you're telling the parent is, your child participated regularly, they were involved, engaged. It's probably why they ended up, maybe one of the contributing reasons why they ended up with the score they didn't, or you have the inverse scenario. So it's a way of providing additional information to the parent to provide context. It's not a,
I agree with you. it is not our job to micromanage the situation. This is a board goal that we asked for, so just getting clarifications. I can tell you that some of the parents we might have in our district, I would be one of them, that if I got my kid's report card and they, whatever their grade was, if I saw like they got 1s or 2s, or even if they got 3s in this trial run, and then next year got a different, like a 2 or a 1, I would be questioning, like, what are you doing in class? Why are you getting a 1 over here and a 3 over here?
That would be the goal.
What is that gonna be? So, I understand that, and we could have some upset parents or kids who didn't feel like they were informed that they were being assessed, whether it's a number or a letter, they're being assessed, and we all know we have high achieving kids that want that 3 or a 4 or whatever, that might be upset by this, that you're gonna have to.
My response to them would be, it's on the report card, which is not official. The official piece of paper from the high school is the transcript, and this is not on the transcript. Once approved, and they will be notified prior to the start of the semester, it will be on the transcript. But right now, it's on the report card, which is an unofficial grade report.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that
So that's
is a
second.
big clarity.
Well,
No,
I
it's
just
in
don't,
my
I
letter.
guess
It's
I
in
would
my
go
letter.
like,
Wait, I still have a follow-up here before we move on. So, you talked a lot about having, like, teachers on the same page with extra credit and zeros and all of that stuff. With these habits, were teachers, like, is there some rubric for these too? So like, if a teacher needs to, appropriately participate in classroom activities, was there something like, well, a kid needs to do, like, participate in a discussion 5 times out of a semester to get a 3?
That's up to the individual teacher.
Okay, so there's still some subjectivity here.
There's,
Yeah,
it's
so they could be
100%,
right into the
it's
same.
100% subjective. And again, it is supposed to be general enough that depending on the class or content area, the teacher has that.
So have teachers been informed that they probably should have discussions with their kids of where they're gonna, like assess them on these things, or is it just kind of?
We listened to our teachers at the middle school and how they do it. We had a couple teachers, one department specifically asked if there were going to be rubrics. And basically, we're modeling how teachers fill this out based on our traveling teachers' experiences, where they are assigning the number score when they're finalizing grades at the end of the semester, right? We did talk about, it's not a requirement, but if you're assigning a 1, this should not be the first time parents are hearing about it at the end of the semester on their report card,
Okay.
right? So if a student is a 1, and that's the first a parent hears of it, that's a whole separate issue where I would be involved.
Okay, thank you, that.
But there is a lot of subjectivity to it.
Correct.
Which,
But
I mean,
I
which
agree,
is-
like, if a kid's gonna get this, and even if it's a trial run, and they've got 1s, I would hope that those conversations have been going along all year. Because that could be shocking to some of our students. Okay, anybody else? I know there are other questions,
I
so.
think it would be the extreme exception to the rule where parents aren't aware of these indicators going into a report card. But it also is providing that additional information by class as to helping clarify why the student got the academic score they did.
But I also feel like it is we do have kids that are going off to college. I know an example I just talked to Emma yesterday. Her kid went off to college and failed out the first semester, got on academic probation because he never went to class and he never turned anything in. And she said, I guess I thought he just would have grown up because he wasn't really going to class in high school and he never turned anything in on time. And, so it was kind of a surprise that he wouldn't do it in college. So I do think these are good opportunities to open a door and let teachers have conversations with parents.
And has there been any conversation in regards to, if you're seeing students that are in the future that would come in on 1s, what type of remediation might happen to work with those students to be able to help them to move forward?
To be honest, we have not had that conversation quite yet.
But I think these are things that have already happened forever, right? Teachers already know the students that are coming to class prepared, that don't pay attention or do pay attention, that turn in their homework, that do their homework. Right, they already know all this stuff. And those conversations have been happening with parents forever, parent-teacher conferences, or, what can I do to help support this grade? It's not what we thought it would be, right? I mean, all those types of inherent conversations that just take place.
And I guess I would say, Dr. Lewis, is it would trigger our MTSS and RTI process that we, like Dr. Spina said, I mean, they are in place. It might just be another trigger for those supports that hasn't existed up to this point. Before, it's been anecdotal, the teacher comes down or sends an email. Now it's just something else that we can track, just like we track attendance, just like we track grades throughout the semester, so.
Sure. Thank you.
I think I heard you say it, but I just want to make sure if there is this pilot period, that there is a process in place for teachers to provide feedback once they've gone through the.
Yeah, so there would be the Google form, like I said.
Okay.
I mean, that would go out probably the second half of June. So we need to decide, is this to the point where some of the suggestions are minimal enough that we are moving ahead with fully implementing? Or do we need to go back, look at it again first semester, pilot it second semester next year, right? We want to get it right. So if the feedback suggests revision, I mean, this is a living document. Whether it's modified in 6 weeks or it's modified in 10 years, as things change, I mean, somebody's going to look at this thing in 20 years and say, who in the world wrote that, right? What were they thinking? So it is built to be an ongoing living document that is adapted and changed to the times.
Yeah, and I also, I want to make sure too, well, first of all, the middle school rubric, unachievement rubric changed many times. It did. I mean, we went to a 4-point, that's kind of how I knew like the 4-point wouldn't work, because then it does become a goal to get like the 4, right? Like you got to get the 4 and everything. And how can you exceed, a 3, really, right? The 3 is like you're coming to class, you're ready to go, you're participating, right? You're doing all the things you're supposed to do to be successful. So 3 is kind of the 3, that's where you want to be. But I also want to make sure we're not overestimating the report card, right? I mean, the report card is just a communication tool. It's the same as if, I called home and said, hey, haven't turned in their homework, 12 to 9. It's just a communication mechanism. That's all it is. It can be a lot of, right? When we shift over to the transcript, then it becomes more of a high stakes component. And I think that's what Dr. Dell was explaining, right? We want to roll this out. We want to collect the feedback. We want to just see how it looks, gain feedback from parents, students, staff, and then kind of see where we're at this summer. So,
So I think the terminology that, like for me, and this is just for me, and I need more explanation than the normal person, like saying when you use the word pilot, it would like we're piloting it on the report card before it goes to the transcript.
That's clearly spelled out on the letter that would go home prior to the end of the semester.
Perfect. Thank you.
There's a picture, a screenshot of this rubric. I mean, it is step by step explanatory.
So I still do have a concern, though, it being rolled out on official transcript next year.
Okay.
I mean, I do, like, maybe it should be like next year is our pilot for everybody, for students, parents, where it's there on the report card, but it's not going to go on the official transcript, and, to give everybody a year of seeing if it's where we want to be. Because, I think we started this whole process so that parents were informed, and like you said, everybody was like, if you were in that class and you did the same thing, you got this. And now I feel like it's kind of maybe moved a little bit more to like more student behavior versus correcting the other thing, which maybe we have to do this before that, and maybe that's a good step. But I want to make sure that we are getting to the point of having accurate grading in that itself, and not just
The reason we tackled this first was because we felt we could not, in the grading committee, we could not start identifying what the necessary individual academics components were without first pulling out the non-achievement. You had to be able to separate the two so we knew what we were going to focus on. Otherwise, it would be even more muddled. So at least that was how we saw the task, right? That we had to separate the two. And we just chose to fully develop this one first. I mean, we could have picked academics and done non-achievement separate or second, but this is just the order we decided to go.
I also think
this is the best way to start. You gotta move the two things. You gotta have your academics over here. You gotta have all the things that are causing those academics to occur or not occur over there, right? So you pull those apart. That's your first big separation. Now, when you dive into academics, that's where That's really the more controversial part, because, you are gonna see some changes, once we start going through that. But non-achievement rubric is actually the easy step in this whole process.
I also think that we have to trust our administrators that if they get those Google Forms back and, whatever comes up on them, I don't know what that's gonna look like, that they'll adjust their timeline if necessary.
I think the key thing is you're giving staff an avenue to put out there, record, and have conversations around stuff they already see every day, and they know it's impacting the grades. They just never had the outlet to do that, right? Like, they already know all this stuff, and they hopefully are having conversations around with parents if applicable, but you're giving them that outlet, and then that allows them to then turn around and focus specifically on grades and what research says is the best way to utilize grades as a communication tool as well. So, but I think there's a lot of flexibility here. If it comes over the summer and there's widespread changes that need to be made, then you have that option. But you can't start until you start, right? So I think that's what we're looking for here, is to roll it out and see what kind of feedback we get.
Are there any other questions on this?
Sorry to
Go ahead.
belabor,
No, keep
but
going.
from like an administrative perspective, are you looking at this data as an aggregate so you can spot anomalous trends, like teacher A maybe is lower than the mean for the same student versus all the other teachers, things like that, to bring things closer to a mean or a standard?
Quite honestly, we had not had that conversation. No, that thought hadn't occurred. Again, I think what's challenging is it's a subjective score, right? So it's subjective data. So I think using it to gauge how teachers are performing their job is probably with the non-achievement rubric not something that we would look at. And we also know that it's just some of its relationships, right? I mean, we have some students who are phenomenal in a few classes, and whether they just don't like the subject matter, a student hates math, there might be some more acting out, or there could be a little bit of a personality conflict. So I think every teacher in the building is going to run into that a little bit. Some love their class, some don't. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to refuse to talk and show you I'm the boss type of thing. So no, I do not think, now that I kind of process it real quick, I don't think that we would use this in that capacity.
Okay. But also remember, one of the key statements about grading practices is that there are no right grades. There's only justifiable grades, right? So just like anything else, if you're giving the student a 3-point, right, as a teacher, you should be able to justify why that is. If you're going to give a student a 3 for participation, you should be able to justify why that is, right? I mean, because the flip side is the example Nancy gave, where, the student always got 3s and poor habits, participation, and behavior, because it was just a gimme, and then, move off to college or go and do a job, and they're not exhibiting it, right? The parent would be like, well, either you weren't giving me honest feedback, or something's really changed with my child. Conversely, if it's a 1, then the parent comes to the teacher and asks, okay, well, why is that? And you should be able to justify that grade, just mark, whatever you want to call it, just as you would with a 1.5 or whatever else it might be. So I think that's the key thing to kind of keep in mind moving through this.
And anecdotal data, very small sample size, right? But just a few teachers on staff who have students at the middle school or have had students at the middle school. I mean, they've even spoken as parents how much they appreciate it, right? It gives them something to talk about at dinner. Great job on the A. Why are you getting a 2 when it comes to behavior in ELA? So, again, very small sample size, but even our staff parents have reported that at the middle school level, they've appreciated that additional information.
Well, I think the student should appreciate the additional information. It's
Probably
not
depends on the
just
score, right?
It's not just that grade, that A you're looking for, but also the teacher's looking at your behavior in class. Are you rude? Are you courteous? And all the things that really make a good citizen. So, I mean, I think it will hopefully end up with a more well-rounded individual.
Well, and we would hope that ultimately when we're done at the end of the day, it's going to help students achieve better and teachers be able to identify those students who are struggling, right? Because There are students who just flat out know how to do school.
Right.
If I show up every day, if I do the extra credit, but I'm getting C's on my test, do I really deserve, do I understand the material? Do I have mastery of the content to such an extent that I should have an A or earn an A, right? Or are we giving false security to our kids by saying, you earned an A in this class, when really their foundational knowledge is at a C+ level? There might be some parents who are very upset by that. There will be some parents who are upset at the end of the day, because this is going to change what's coming home, right, for their student, but it should better inform where that student is at as far as a learner in that class.
Do we have any other questions?
Not a question I need answered today, but I think as we move down this track of standardized grading, it's just going to spread like wildfire that we are trying to do this, and I hope you have...
We are not moving to a standardized grading program. We are standardizing our building grading practice. So let me preface that we are not moving to standardized grades. That's O'Connor's system. We are not moving to grading for learning that the middle school has in place. We are moving to a standardized building-wide grading system that we are building component by component that we feel best fits our needs at WHS. So when I guess I need to be careful when I use the word standardized, because it implies standardized grading. It is going to be a building-wide grading practice.
Thank you very much. I think that was
Thank
exactly
you
my
for,
point, that
thank
that's
you.
going to
No.
happen
Yep, let me state that.
ASAP.
Any other questions? I appreciate all the work that all of you and the group has done on this. I know this was a board goal. I appreciate you standing and taking all of our questions tonight.
This is the easy one. Wait till you get the other ones.
Right.
This is the easiest one.
It is, but I appreciate you answering all of our questions and letting us take the time. I was at the elementary when we aligned at each grade level, and it took a long time, and it could get ugly. Emotions are in play, and you don't want to necessarily be locked in doing something else. So I appreciate you breaking it down, taking the time and doing it with staff.
Thank you.
I am going to move us along. If there aren't any other questions.
He still has more to go.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm moving us along to the book.
Oh, okay.
But if you have any other questions about this, please feel free to reach out to Dr. Delp. I know sometimes after the evening you might come up with others. I do encourage you to reach out to Dr. Delp or to Adam. This was
I think board members can talk to me anytime you want about this.
this was
I got tons of
our,
stuff to read if you're interested.
yeah, this was our board goal. So we should really have an understanding of what's happening and why we did it. Okay, if we can move on to the handbook.
I have one more component under grading.
Okay.
So
Yep,
the second piece had to do with the board goal. Objective 1, all buildings will improve upon the quality, timeliness, and consistency of feedback to students and parents. We focused on timeliness. This was protocol that I wrote, took to the department chair SLT group. They approved it. We took it to the entire staff. They provided feedback, but it was kind of a staff-wide vote in the library that there was nothing critical that needed to be changed. It went back to the department chairs, and they officially voted this in unanimously in February of 2022. There's two components to this. The timeline for the assignment being created in Power School within 2 days of the assignment being assigned, right? So students and parents are both aware that it's out there rather than waiting. Grading in a timely manner was very subjective. 2 days to one person is 2 weeks to me. So the assignment has to be created to inform within 2 days. It has to be graded and entered, and let me say there are always exceptions to the rule, right? I was an English teacher. When I collected 150 essays, they weren't going to be done in 10 days. It just wasn't feasible. So there are always outliers and exceptions, but for the most part, there's no reason that grades cannot be in Power School in 10 school days. That's 2 weeks. That is quite a period of time. So this is to provide students and families with an update within 48 hours if something's been assigned, and to provide more timely feedback to how they're doing through the semester, rather than waiting 9 weeks and I put in 2 months worth of work, right? And all of a sudden I'm shocked because I thought I had a B-, but it turns out I'm a full letter grade lower because things weren't in. And it will also help outside of the classroom as well with, for example, eligibility, right? So it'll be more accurate as far as eligibility goes. So this is something that did not exist. Like I said, I drafted this, but ensured that it was approved both by the department chairs and SLT and entire staff, because I want there to be buy-in. I want the staff to say, yep, this is good practice and it's something we are behind because Ryan Spain just got hired tonight. This is going to get slid across the table to him and say, this is our timeline, right, when it comes to grading. So that was the process with this piece. And honestly, this was very fast, right? It was just basically draft it. Do people support it or not? People thought it was very realistic, and it was approved. This was not a big process, but it was approved by the entire faculty.
This is
Question.
very much appreciated.
Is it only assignments that require a grade? Or is it every assignment that, whether or not some teachers I know maybe assign something, but they have to turn it in, but there's no grade assigned to it other than you turning it in was the grade?
The intent was if it's assigned and it's supposed to be turned in, then it should be in Power School.
It should be in Power. Okay.
So that if it's not turned in, again, people have an idea that it's
Of what
not
to
turned
expect.
in.
What kind of ramifications are there if a teacher is not meeting that standard?
So just like any time there's a teacher with a concern, right, it would first, depending on the level of offense, right, but it would be, hey, informal conversation, help me understand, just a reminder, this is the guidelines that we put in place. You know, it's come to my attention they aren't being followed. Help me understand. And there might be a good reason. Life happens, right? People, something might have come up. Or somebody might just say, you're right, I'm sorry, I just kind of lost track of the 10 days or whatever. If it happened again, depending on the situation, at that point it would become more of a formal meeting, one-on-one, and it would be documented. And then from there, again, whether it's a meeting with the union rep, a letter in the file, I mean, we just have our progressive steps. But it would start with an informal conversation.
Just again, not to beat this to death, but remember, grades are designed to be a communication mechanism, right? You're communicating with parents, you're communicating with the student about things that are going well, things that are opportunities for improvement, right? And so, you know, sports analogies are always really good with grades, right? So if you're going to shoot free throws and you're hitting all 50 of your free throws, you know, you got your 4-point, that's great. You might have had to shoot 9,000 free throws in practice, right? To get to the point where you're hitting them all. And as a parent, you want to know, right? Like, are you getting better at shooting free throws? So some of the stuff that might go in Power School might just be feedback to students and parents, like, hey, you're getting better, all right? Or I worked with you on your form after school today a little bit to make sure that, you know, your shot's going to go in more often. Also, as a parent, though, I want to make sure that my child's not even showing up to practice the free throws, right? Or they're not, you know, they're not even going to the gym class at all, or going to the gym after school to practice. Or if when they're there, they're not ready, they didn't bring their shoes, and, you know, I mean, whatever it might be, right? And so that's kind of where the non-achievement rubric comes into play. So it's just, it's a communication mechanism, and having a consistent one is really the goal here, right? So parent knows teacher A, we'll have the same types of protocols that we're following with teacher B. A lot harder to do than it is to say, though. Right? So we're working through it.
So just to remind, no, sorry, thought the hand was going up. Any other questions? All right, just a reminder, extra credit and zeros are next on our list. We'll see how long that takes because we're going to do it until we feel that it's right before we move on. These are not individual academic grading components that we are going to rush just to meet a timeline. We're going to make sure that they are done and developed and flushed out before they're implemented, before we move on to the next topic. So extra credit and zeros could be a semester thing, it could be a 2-semester thing, I don't know. You know, we haven't done this as a building. And I just want to say kudos to the staff because they are passionate about what they do in all aspects. And they are a very professional staff that I'm going to try and trust my kids to next semester, second semester, or for the fall, everybody has passion about their practices, and there's no doubt people are being forced to think differently, right? And that's easier for some than others. So there's no doubt there are some growing pains here. So, credit to them for doing this work because it's not easy. Any other questions about the educational update?
The assignment posted in Power School and grades entered in Power School, will that be rolled out as part of the pilot for 22-23, or will that be the June 2024?
No, we started that in February because
okay.
it didn't necessarily impact student grades, right? It didn't have anything to do with kids. It didn't have anything to do with the student side of it. It was just best practice. So we did not have any reason not to start as far as a professional responsibility.
Thank you.
We all set to move on?
All right, last but not least, and I will move quickly, the handbook. I did a cover letter, right, with highlights in red. The first piece is just updated language. That seemed very dated to me when I read that bullet point. Discipline is required for educational success. It just sounds more appropriate to say accountability is a component of educational success. The second piece, advanced placement testing for college credit. This, again, was just updating the language, right? As I continue to read the handbook, just like board policy, these are written over years, and I come across things that just need to be updated to better reflect what's happening in the high school or the times. That was the case with the AP for college credit. Dual enrollment, same thing. This is a practice that's been in place at the high school prior to my arrival. That if a student, we pay for the dual enrollment class, but if they fail, they reimburse the school. So again, a practice that has been in place. The credit, no credit. This is something that we wanted to clean up, especially coming out of the pandemic, where students had the option basically for a year and a half to elect to receive credit at any point in the semester, especially when we were remote. So in order to put some structure to it, and so that now that we're full-time back in the building, students have a better idea of that timeline. If students want to move to a credit, no credit, whether that helps alleviate anxiety or some of the pressure in a class, we did not see any reason not to accommodate that request. Page 17 is the non-achievement.
I just have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
16B, so parents don't have to approve of that anymore? They did, and now they don't? The credit, no credit, you said
We have
consent
not
must be
required
obtained from.
parental approval.
I have a question with, we used to do with attendance, if a student missed so many days in the class, they would move to a credit, no credit. Is that still in place?
It is, but it's based in the attendance policy.
Okay.
And again, it's not just a black and white, right? You hit the number, it's triggered. It's looking at each case individually for why they've hit that number, that 15, but that is laid out. That automatic, us moving the student to that grading track rather than them electing themselves to move to that grading track.
Okay, I do have another question on that, because why would we remove the parents from that when we're changing our entire grading scale to give parents more information, but here we're allowing a student to credit, no credit without informing or getting the parents' permission or conversation with them? Because normally, if I'm assuming if you're choosing that, then you have some special circumstance, I would think, that your family would want to be involved in.
We can add that.
Thank you.
For the dual enrollment, is a fail a D? Can you remind me?
Failing a dual enrollment is a 0.0.
It's a zero?
It's
Okay.
an
It's a D in our system?
It's an F.
It's an F. Okay.
A 1.0 would be a D in our system.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a 0. Showing up, you got the half grade.
0.5 would be a D minus. Any other questions on the credit, no credit? Okay, page 17 was just adding the language about the non-achievement rubric in anticipation that This would be ready to pilot this spring and implement in the fall. Graduation requirements, there was some strike through. Again, this was outdated language that's no longer applicable. Page 23, 24, Michigan Virtual. Similar to the dual enrollment, where students automatically are required to reimburse the school for the dual enrollment tuition if they fail. Michigan Virtual, they are not required to reimburse the district unless they want to take another Michigan Virtual class. In that case, they have to reimburse us for the first one that was failed. Again, this has just been practice in the building, and it was something that was identified as not being in the handbook. Page 27 and 28, senior schedules, part-time second semester. This is new. We have more and more seniors requesting to move to part-time schedules during the second semester. They've met their graduation requirements, or they are on track to meet all of them at the end of the second semester and graduate with the required credits required by the MMC. So there was just nothing in writing to guide students and parents and staff in working through that process. So this is the timeline for what that would look like. There are no reduced schedules first semester. If a student is on track second semester, in requests to move to a part-time schedule, they will need to attend all of their classes for the first few weeks of the second semester to ensure that they aren't in a class they might enjoy. And then after the first few weeks, if they would still like to drop and move to a reduced schedule, again, because they are on track to graduate, as we talked about it at the building level, and as I thought about it, I don't know what the answer would be, what the rationale would be for saying no, other than it's my opinion, need to be here, which is a very traditional mindset. High school is becoming very customizable, and it's accelerated through the pandemic. Kids can take virtual classes, kids can dual enroll, kids can go to the Wilson Talent Center. Right now, between those three options, 1/4 of our students are not taking in-person classes 6 hours a day at the high school. So when students enter this agreement coming in as a freshman that they have to have 22 credits to graduate, and they meet their obligation, I don't know why I would tell them no, or what would be my rationale for telling them no, other than high school has traditionally been 6 in-person classes a day, and you need to be here because it's good for you.
So can I ask, would this be an example of that? I took summer classes through Michigan Virtual, I have my 22 credits, the only thing I need is
No.
English class for senior year.
So if you take 6 classes a year, you have the opportunity to earn 12 half credits, 6 full credits.
Correct.
So over the course of 4 years, you have the opportunity to earn 24 credits during the normal school year. You're only required to have 22 to graduate.
Correct.
So some students have done credit advancement. Some students earn credit coming out of the middle school for Spanish and geometry.
Right, so however that looks.
This could be for anyone.
It could have, I mean, my kids took Michigan, what we paid, and they took Michigan Virtual and got summer credit, so they were done.
But they wouldn't have to.
Theoretically,
They wouldn't have
do
to,
that,
right.
correct. But they get their credits, they have the 22, they have to take 1 full year of English, that's first hour. Second hour, they might have an elective they like, but third hour, they could go and get a job and be done with school.
So the 2 senior requirements are, at the end of the day, at the end of the second semester, you have to have 22 credits, you have to have math and English your senior year.
Well, a half a credit of math.
Of
right?
math, yes. So, but if you have that math done the first semester and it's out of the way, the only thing you really need, as long as you're going to have the 22 credits, you wouldn't be able to drop 5 though, because that would take you to 21.5. So you would have to keep at least 2 hours. But we have students that want to go work,
Yeah.
right? We have students that just want to move on and do something else. And again, I don't know the rationale for not allowing them to do so, because they've met their obligations that they entered into this contract coming in as freshman year as set by the state of Michigan. So as those numbers have increased over the last couple of years, we just felt it important to have something in writing, guidelines for all of us. Any other questions on that? Page 34, the tardy policy, striking language.
Uh-huh.
It's perfect timing.
Siri, eavesdropping.
That was Siri.
Hello.
Basically saying that tardies can be counted into the academic grade. That was stricken. The dress code was updated verbatim to reflect the policy the board previously adopted earlier this year. On page 53, the insubordination defiance definition was expanded to include suspicious behavior. For example, multiple students being in a bathroom stall together with the door closed would suggest prohibited behavior such as vaping or the use of other prohibited substances. This language has been approved over the phone by our attorney, but the idea behind it has been approved by the attorney. The language itself has not been approved. So I have emailed her this language for her to either approve or to clean up. So once I get that back from her, the language will be modified to reflect exactly what she approves. But the idea of the suspicious behavior, she said we were okay with that.
Perfect.
The last one, this is just another addition to the Code of Conduct violations. It's just another general place for those behaviors that are, I don't even want to say dangerous, right? A little bit disruptive. Our catch-all to this point has been disruptive behavior, but this would just add a little bit more specifics to it. Disruptive behavior is so broad, right, that if it is a safety issue because you're throwing binders down the hallway during passing time that could clunk someone in the head, it just provides a little bit more clarity rather than that general disruptive behavior catch-all. But again, these would be fairly minor. That's why level 1 and 2, I mean, we're not talking about suspendable offenses. Any questions?
on any of that? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
One last thing, I gave you all of your invitation to the commencement ceremony. We do not have the parking passes yet. We've requested them, but we haven't received them. So once we do receive them, we can either coordinate to have them here at central office or we can mail them to you if that's more convenient, but it'll be the same practice as it's been in the past for those of you that have been to commencement at the Wharton. We'll have the parking passes in the loading dock area. Okay. Thanks, everyone. See you all at graduation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Adam.
You might be a record there.
I know, you did well. Fine, fine.
So we're all the way at superintendent's update now. All right, I'll make it quick. The June 6th board meeting, the preschool and Little Hornets, Kids Corner and Little Hornets will present their ed update and handbook presentation. Sarah Tynan will also be presenting the final budget amendment for this year, as well as the projected 22-23 budget for your review. And Dr. Cook, Kelly Campbell, and Cassie Fander will be here to present the proposal for our core elementary literacy program, which was highlighted at your last meeting. So that'll be a busy board meeting as well. Couple key dates. Well, then the last meeting in June, I will give a summary on the summer projects that will be taking place in our meeting. And then just a couple key notes to remember before the next meeting in June. Our retiree event is on 1 June at 4 p.m. at the high school commons. And then obviously graduation on June 5th, 2 p.m. at Wharton. And again, you have your guide or listing of end of school year events that Betsy prepared, but those are obviously two of the bigger ones on that list.
Any questions about those? I want to do it this time. Okay, next, moving on. Board marketing and communications. Amanda?
We met and ran through some talking points for recreational millage renewal, which include an upcoming newsletter and a flyer distributed to the community. We talked about the road signs. We'll eventually get one up for our state champions, and that's great that this process has started. I'm super excited personally about the community sign, the electronic billboard, and that's going to be over the top of the sign in McCormick Park. We can't really have it on the four corners downtown because it would cause traffic accidents while people read the sign. And we will be taking up about half of the messages on that electronic billboard, and therefore we will be paying for some of that cost, which seems totally fair, and I think it's going to be a great deal for everyone. We also reviewed our current social media plans in place. They're working well. Oh, and I did want to point out that the language for the recreation millage renewal, anything on that has been reviewed by our attorneys, because we have to be super careful about following campaign finance law. That's it, thanks. Anybody have any questions? No?
Do they, and I might have missed this, you might have said this, is there a projected date when that sign will be up and ready to go?
It did get approved at the last meeting, right?
Electronic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have there's a number of different community organizations that are invested in this project. We have another meeting on Thursday, kind of a coordination meeting, but at this point, the city's approved the location, the actual sign design itself, and they approved last Monday the policy language of the organization. So really the only thing left is to pay for it, get it installed at this point.
Confirming the funds, right?
Well, they're paying for it,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, then
the,
it's like an 8-week order until it comes in.
right. So the school has its allocation, will have its allocation planned for, and then the other organizations will need to do what they gotta do to come up with their.
Good question. Cool. Nice that it's moving forward.
Mhm.
Any other questions for the marketing and communication committee? All right, Sarah, policy.
You'll see numerous policies coming before you tonight, some of which have proposed revisions and recommendations. And that was the last meeting that we will have this academic school year.
All right. Let's see. Okay, on to discussion items. Adam, I'm thinking you might want to take the piano line.
So we set aside a portion for technology upgrades under our ESSER 3 allocation grant that was submitted to the state. We found out a few weeks ago that that portion of the ESSER submission had been approved. And so consequently, we now have a $50,000 line item via our ESSER 3 allocation that could be put towards the upgrading of our panic alarm system. So this is a process that we started several years ago in terms of implementing some type of automated system into our buildings. At the time, we did not have the requisite funds to fully implement it the way this proposal would result in. And so it was a good start based on the kind of a shoestring budget. But this allocation will actually allow us to implement the full system as it's actually intended to be done at all our buildings. And so some of the features that this will allow, first of all, it'll expand the number of staff who are able to trigger a panic alarm at any of our buildings. So we're continuing to move away from a centralized location that would trigger such an alarm. Think back a number of years ago, we used to only have the office calling through like a PA system, right? But obviously in many cases, unfortunately, the office is the first location in the building to be compromised. And so how do you notify everyone in the building there's an emergency? You can't do it through the PA system. So we've taken a number of steps to move forward on that. This will actually expand that and allow both staff to be able to trigger that alarm if an emergency were to occur. The other piece that it will do is will notify everybody in the building that the alarm has been triggered and where the location was that the alarm was triggered from. So it'll actually pop up on computer screens indicating that, room A4 has triggered the emergency alarm. And then just like the system we have now, obviously that recording will start playing out over through all the PA speakers in that building. And then lastly, it will significantly reduce the response time for first responders. It will notify dispatch, but it won't stop there. It'll actually move on and actually notify law enforcement through their local radio system. So it'll go directly to the car. It'll come over their radio indicating that, pick a building, room, whatever, has triggered the lockdown or alarm or panic alarm. And that'll allow them to not only respond instantaneously, actually bypassing the few seconds or minutes it might take for dispatch to get the call out. They'll be able to move right to that building and go right to that room in the event that there's an emergency. So there's a couple different facets to this. Part of it is the vote that's coming in front of you for approval of the system, the core system. Then outside of that, we also have a contractor that we work with to install the system we currently have. We'll be working as an advisor to our technology department to do some of the prerequisite infrastructure work that needs to happen for the system to be installed. And then we'll also be purchasing some additional components to enhance our PAs and the microphone systems at all the buildings, but especially at the elementary schools. And then lastly, we'll also need to purchase a police radio, which actually gets hardwired into the system, and so when it's activated, it actually goes through that radio and then out to local law enforcement directly. So putting all those things together, I think this is the next step in safety and security for our buildings. And the nice thing is it's an eligible expense under our grant funds, and based on our survey results, the community was also supportive of technology infrastructure upgrades through the use of license-free allocations.
So Adam, after if we move this to action at our next board meeting, is this something that could be implemented, like bought and installed over the summer?
Yeah, so that's the plan. So there's a lot of legwork. I mean, I'm under the assumption that the board will support this, but we've already had multiple meetings with stakeholders, including law enforcement, about the system. We've had multiple meetings with the vendor, and our consultant has been actively involved. Right now, we're working with Ingham County Emergency Management on the police radio system to make sure that will be installed properly and we get the right data. So there's a lot of legwork that's going into this. I mean, again, we can't foresee any supply chain issues. That's always an issue these days. But if everything goes to plan, we'll get the components. They'll have their own installer that will come out over their tech department to get all that taken care of. Our consultant then works on the side to take care of all the other logistical and prerequisite technology issues that need to get solved as part of the installation process. So ideally, it's a summer piece that's ready to go for the fall.
Any questions for Adam?
The software licenses, are those permanent?
Yeah, and they transfer across devices. So you're basically buying a license for it's more than that, but let's say you buy a license for 10 computers, and those computers are rotated out. The new 10 computers I can put in will take those licenses.
Any other questions? All right, do you feel comfortable to move this to action? Okay, move it to action in 2 weeks, or our next meeting. Policy, board policies. I'm not sure who wants to take this. Or who?
Yeah, I will. So I'm gonna go through a few at a time, I guess. So the first one that I'll speak about is policy 7840, which is the substitute teaching policy. We looked at this, and the contents in this policy is covered in 5685 and 5750. So we're saying that it's not needed in both areas, so to remove it. Again, with 7900, which is the school improvement, we are suggesting, recommending that it is already merged / covered in 7120, so it is not needed in both places. And then we are asking, or recommending, I should say, to eliminate 7910 which is the site-based decision-making. We're saying that it's not needed because this is responsibility of the superintendent and administration, and these are some of those things that, as a board, we don't really get the leads of, so we feel that this policy is not needed based on that. Policy 8050, again, we're saying, suggesting to strike this because it is covered in 8020. And then the last one, I believe, is a new policy, 8130, which is searches of lockers and students. This is a new policy that was written by Troon. And that is all that I have, I believe. Do you have any questions?
We're taking, 8130, which says searches for lockers and students.
Yes.
We're getting rid of that and we're basically replacing it with what Troon wrote.
Correct. That way it has the legal reference.
Well, these are also a series of 1997 policies, which is extremely outdated. And as Dr. Dell alluded to, we're running into situations where these are more pertinent now, and we need to kind of make sure that all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. So we just turned it over to the attorneys and said, hey, take what we got and just redo it, which is what they did. So.
Yeah, we felt more comfortable having a legal opinion written in. Any other questions?
So we're keeping the 8055, changing the student grades.
We're keeping it with just minor revisions,
Yes.
basically
Yes.
referring
Yeah, the ones that I
stakeholders back to the
didn't talk about, they're just minor revisions too.
So can you give me an example of when we would change the student's grade? Like what would that be? Like,
Well, it mostly is applicable to the high school, so you might have, just like anything else, so we're talking about justifiable grades, right? So you might have a parent or student that questions why they got, 2.5 instead of a 3 point, right? So there's an appeals process that's outlined in the high school handbook. And policy is more or less just, telling folks to reference that handbook to reference the specific protocol to go through.
so there are any questions on any of I believe there's 4 policies that were rewritten. If I'm counting correctly. Nope, we're good with them all? Good.
And there are a lot of policies that we've gone through this year, so I've asked Adam maybe in the fall. He likes to calculate how many we did, and so that would be interesting to see. We've done a lot of work from this committee this year, so again, we won't meet again this calendar, or this academic year, but possibly in the summer. We'll start back up again.
You just wanted to set a record this year.
We could have.
Okay. And next would be. Next, administrative salaries? Yes, please.
So I understand that administrators are ending the first year of a 2-year contract. However, I'd also want to point out, and I think the board understands too, the tremendous challenge they've had from a leadership perspective this year. Not only dealing with all the secondary and tertiary effects of the pandemic, but also, I think as you've seen tonight, making well thought through and deliberate progress on the board's goals, despite all that. And so what I'm proposing is the board consider I guess if it was a collective bargaining unit, we would call it a wage opener of sorts, as a means of recognizing the leadership that was displayed by our administrators over the course of the year by reopening the wage or salary portion of their contract and augmenting it as the memo stipulates above what their current contract would allow.
Are there any questions on the administrative salary increases? No? All right, we can move that to action also. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to Adam before our next meeting. Can I please get a motion for our calendar?
Make a motion that the Williamston Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular meeting held on May 2nd, 2022 as presented.
Support?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Next, we have some roll call items. So can I get a first for the approved resolution of support for the ISD budget?
Make a motion that the Williamston Board of Education approve the resolution of support for IISD Budget 22-23 as it reads, and this is a long one. So,
Yeah, it is, so hold on.
so whereas Section 624 of the revised code as amended requires the intermediate school board to submit its proposed budget not later than May 1st of each year to the board of each constituent district for review. And 2, not later than June 1st of each year, the board of each constituent district shall review the proposed intermediate school district budget, shall adopt a board resolution expressing its support or disapproval of the proposed intermediate school district budget, and shall submit to the intermediate school board any specific objections and proposed changes the constituent district board has to that budget. Now therefore be it resolved that 1, the Board of Education has received and reviewed the proposed intermediate school district budget in accordance with Section 624 of the revised school code as amended, and by the adoption of this resolution expresses its support for the proposed intermediate school district budget. 2, the Secretary of the Board of Education or her designee shall forward a copy of this resolution to the intermediate school board or its superintendent no later than June 1st, 2022. And 3, all resolutions insofar as they conflict with this resolution be and the same are hereby rescinded.
Second. Okay, so Chris, and then seconded by Dave. Amanda, would you take us through roll call?
Amanda, yes. Chris?
Yes?
Dave?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
And Nancy?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the Williamston Education Association contract?
Make a motion that the Williamston Board of Education approve the contract with the Williamston Education Association.
Second.
Dave seconded. Amanda, can you take us through roll call?
Amanda, yes. Chris?
Yes?
Dave?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
And Nancy?
Yes. I would just like to add before we move on with this, I really do appreciate all the work that Sarah and Adam did on this, and I really appreciate the Williamston Education Association for all of their hard work and getting this done before the end of the school year. It is much appreciated, and very thankful to have all of them and all the work they did to get this together. So thank you, everybody. Again, we have some separate action items. Can I get a motion for the approved leave request?
I make a motion that the Williamston Board of Education approve the request for Shannon Coy Kendall for unpaid leave through the duration of the 2021-22 school year.
Can I have a second?
I second it.
Deb? Deborah? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Can I please have a motion for the student handbook?
Motion that the Williamson Board of Education approves the 2022-2023 Student Handbook for Discovery Elementary and Explorer Elementary as presented.
Second.
Dave, second. Any discussion? Sorry, I didn't ask that before. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Thank you. Can I have a motion for the technology service agreement with Ingham ISD?
I move that the Williamson Board of Education approve the 2022-2023 Technology Services Agreement with the Ingham Intermediate School District.
Second?
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. On the next, there are several. We had to break these up. So can I have a motion for the probationary teacher status changes?
Recommend that the Williamson Board of Education move the following district staff from 4th to 5th year probationary status. Lindsay Bolas, Kelly Goudreau, Adele Girk, Mariah Jorgensen, Alexandra Mikulski, Jeannie Norman, Mara Potier. I'm looking at over that. Haley Rooney and Allison Scott.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Can I get a motion for the approved 3rd to 4th year probation teachers?
I make a motion that the Williamson Board of Education move the following district staff from 3rd to 4th year probationary status. Anna Brummett, Hannah Clark, Claire Cook, Caitlin Griffiths, Ruby Jones, Meredith
Kaminsky.
I'm sorry.
Kaminsky.
Kaminsky?
Thank you. Sarah Long, Kara Nussbaum, Courtney Smith, and Caitlin Wilcox.
Second.
Dave, second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Can I please get a motion to approve the 2nd to 3rd year probationary teachers?
I make a motion that the Williamson Board of Education move the following district staff from 2nd to 3rd year probationary status: Laura Egger, Kaylee Hodgson, Bailey Lawrence, and Carrie Radswian.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Can I please get a motion to approve our 1st to 2nd year probationary teachers?
Williamson Board of Education moved the following district staff from 1st to 2nd year probationary status: Madison Battle, Abigail Black, Erin Chamas, Emily Cleland, Cassandra Eberhardt, Colleen Ferris, Kimber Peterson, Kennedy Siemens, Laura Van Slambrook, and Jordan Williams.
Second.
Sarah seconded that.
Yes.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So congratulations to all of our teachers. They moved.
Yay.
Quite a bunch of them, so that's pretty impressive. Nice. We have our board goals there, which we kind of got an update a little bit more today. Correspondence, we didn't have any correspondence. There are no citizens in here, right? There's no one behind the, so we don't have any citizens. We're up to board member reports and requests.
I do have one.
Okay?
Adam, going off of what our student said earlier tonight about the PE credit, I know that that student was not the first student. There have been students before that that have the same scenarios. So I'd like you to look into that. She gave a lot of research behind. I would like, you and I can meet separately, or you can give a full report to the board at some point. That would be helpful.
So can I piggyback on that? If you don't mind.
I don't
That was my request.
You call people out of order, not me, so.
Well,
You're the president, so you can do what you.
Oh, touche. I'll let you hit that one. I actually want to add on to that because I've been thinking a lot about her coming. I can pull up the requirements for high school from the Michigan Department of Ed. Anybody can do it. what these students are requesting, what parents have requested in the past, this goes back almost like 8 to 10 years. We get this every year, we get it this time of year. We never really can do anything to get it in practice for the fall, and then it kind of falls away, and then we're here, and we're getting in this cycle. What she's stating is actually correct. We can, with board approval, replace a band with a gym credit. There are schools in our district that do it many different ways. Some you have to be in band 4 years to get that, some 2, some just 1. I mean, it's been done all different ways. And we ask for reports. I know that I've heard the same song and dance. You know, some people that I used to don't want it, some people do want it. It could cause this, it could cause that. So I've been thinking about this, and I think we need to request, or I would like to request some specific data. So I guess and you can add or do what else you want to do, but I am requesting that we get some specific data on how many kids are doing a personal curriculum to get out of gym. I would like that number. Are we talking 50 kids? Are we talking 200 kids? How many kids are personally curriculum out of gym? And here's a second scenario that happens. My daughter took an AP class, personal curriculum out of gym. Her senior year, needed to have a class, took a gym class. So to me, that's kind of a wash. She took the gym class anyway. I would also like to know how many band members personally curriculum out of gym. I don't think, I mean, for students that want to do this, there's an actual need, or whatever the reasoning is, I think there's this fear that it's, 300 students, and what are we gonna do? I feel like it could be a smaller number, but that specific data might help us move forward with some other information. That's my request. If you have something else, Sarah.
No, I agree with that.
To look at it.
Not that it was okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to remind the board that, not to have a discussion about this tonight, but we did this investigation maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and the decision was to maintain status quo as far as this issue. So I'm happy to dig it up again, but
I would like
just want to remind you that it was recently.
It's a different board.
No, it's a different board, and it's a different year, right? So I mean,
It is.
it's perfectly legit request by all means. I'm just saying, but it was recently reviewed.
Right, and I feel like and I would piggyback, I feel like it gets looked at every year. I'm not.
And we did it in the fall because of actually what you
Correct.
just mentioned, that it always comes up in the spring. So we did it in the fall that year to make sure it wasn't like a last second thing. Yeah. But that said, I absolutely will get that information.
I think if we look at some hard data, that might help us.
And maybe just one thing to assist with what you're asking for, because I know that, at least right now, the counselors are doing everything by paper in regards to tracking the requirements. So we maybe say, if we're looking at how many students have done this, maybe look at one specific class, like the senior class of this year, just as an example, because then they're not having to look at all of the high school and trying to look at paper for all those individuals.
Good point. So this isn't tracked on a computer that they can just.
It is not.
Okay, I agree with that.
I was surprised at that, but I found that out, that it is still tracked in a binder for every student.
So if we can look at this year's senior class. This year's senior class could, I mean, I don't know if it would be skewed because we have COVID or not, but
Maybe,
gives
yeah.
us a number.
Yeah. I just know it would be very overwhelming if I had to look through every
Yeah,
student to
it
try to
is
figure that
paper.
out.
You're right, absolutely. That's a good point, Chris. I didn't
Yeah.
realize it was done that way, so that would be. Amanda.
I got to participate this weekend in our middle school district honor band, which I didn't know existed, and I just want to say how awesome it was and give kudos to our band director, Lynn Kelsey, because these being middle school students, getting to interact with other middle school students who were just as excited about music as they were was just a really powerful experience, and the performance was wonderful. So I was very happy to do that.
Amazing, what you can do, that's good. Anything else? Is that good? This is a really long meeting and we got here early, so I appreciate all of you for hanging in and doing your due diligence. Very much appreciated. I can take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
Yeah.
Done? Deborah? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, good night. Have a wonderful evening.